Come hold my heart. Come hold my breath. Come hold my child before the day forgets.
My children were taken from me in a similar way by 5 police officers, without warning, without preparation. They were 7 and 9. By order of the court, I was not allowed to see or hear from them again. It has been 4 years, and they never got to return home, even to pick up their belongings or to say goodbye.
The morning does not open right a sock.
I'm a forensic psychiatrist with 25 years of experience serving as an expert witness for the criminal and civil courts, and nothing could have ever prepared me for the abuse and violence I came to see through the family courts.
I would not have known about family courts except for my sister's divorce. One moment, her children are thriving under her care with perfect physical and psychological health, and she's praised around the neighborhood for her parenting skills. The next moment, her previously absentee father files for divorce, and her children are seized in a police raid without warning, and the violently abusive father who almost killed each of his 2 children by head injury gets sole custody.
Did you say that the child was taken by a SWAT team?
Yes.
From a mother
Who was simply
unarmed,
carrying out her parenting time with them.
unarmed in her
No
home?
warning, no concerns about her parenting ability whatsoever, and that was when the custody was switched.
This is quite an indictment of the system, madam.
And
All
no
right.
plenary hearing for going on 4 years.
All right.
Within the context of child custody cases, there exists multi-layered violence that has yet to enter into the collective conscience of the international community as a human rights issue.
As a survivor, I recognize my privilege in speaking out. There are so many who are suffering in silence.
It was the most devastating feeling to know I had gone to the ends of the earth but could not protect my children.
I want people to understand that family court isn't just difficult. It is devastating, and it is a long process.
The most troubling part is the deliberate orders issued by courts to return a child to an abusive parent, even when there is credible evidence of abuse, and only because contact with that parent was considered more important than any other consideration, including the safety and security of that child.
When reading all of these case citations, the judges have some divine authority to decide what's best for the child.
We do not ordinarily think of family courts as sites of violence, but by denying, or worse, exploiting the existence of domestic violence and child abuse, family courts have become one of the deadliest places for children and the adults who try to protect them.
I have to, survive this to get my kids back. If not, at least they'll know that I tried.
The morning does not open right a sock beneath the chair. Crumbs like constellations on the kitchen floor. The spoon remembers your mouth, mine remembers your name. The air holds the shape of laughter, folded like a map that no one can read anymore. Come hold my heart, come hold my breath, come hold my child before the day forgets.
The video credit goes to Catherine Jones. Thank you everyone for coming, and welcome to to this critical conference addressing perhaps the least known public health emergency of our time. It is Family Court Awareness Month, created to raise public consciousness of a national crisis. Tens of thousands of innocent children and families are being destroyed each year for up to $175 billion of profit that pass through the family courts. And victims and witnesses are being incarcerated without due process simply for speaking about what has happened to them. Courts are not places we ordinarily associate with lawlessness or helping violent criminals commit their crimes. We think of family courts as places where we go to solve family problems, not to create them where none existed, or to amplify already life-endangering domestic violence or child abuse. Yet, cases that would have taken weeks or months in criminal court to be resolved the right way enter family court and take years or even decades only to end up the wrong way. Criminals are exonerated, innocent victims are emotionally and financially devastated, and millions of children have been traumatized for life. The human rights abuses I have observed as an expert witness in approximately 70 family court cases in approximately 30 different states are the reasons that have propelled me to organize this conference. For the first time, legislators, experts, journalists, and survivors have gathered from all around the country to recognize this as a national emergency that requires urgent solutions. We need action today. This conference is supported by the Institute of Forensic Science, an organization dedicated to bringing rigorous medical standards to family court proceedings, and Physicians Worldwide, a branch of the World Mental Health Coalition that seeks to raise awareness of family court violence as a medical issue affecting the safety and survival of our children. Attorney Bruce Fein, perhaps the most celebrated constitutional lawyer in the country and a champion of human rights, who has served in every branch of the U.S. government and was once on a short list for the U.S. Supreme Court, but now a friend and collaborator, will give the keynote speech. Attorney Fein.
Well, thank you for that wonderful introduction. I always remind an audience that the host is never speaking under oath. So they're entitled to exaggerate. I want to focus my remarks on how we create a family court system that has justice at the centerpiece. It's been said that the history of justice is the history of procedural protections. And something that I'm an expert in, since I've been here for 50 years, been all through courts, is process is essential. And so let me enumerate what I believe are critical components of a reform package, and then how we can try to implement this particular program. And remind everyone, as an example, things don't happen overnight because the status quo has defenders. In 1848 at Seneca Falls, the organization was formed to obtain the franchise for women. It's 1919, success came. So it doesn't always take that long, but you need to be in for the long haul, because those who currently occupy the current positions will move heaven and earth to retain it because they benefit from it. This is just a reality we have to recognize. I believe perhaps the simplest and one of the most important reforms is transparency. The U.S. Supreme Court has held that you have a constitutional right to attend criminal trials, mostly civil trials. And this is something that simply doesn't happen in the typical family court system. Justice Brandeis once said that sunshine is the best disinfectant, the electric lamp the most efficient policeman. So keeping things secret encourages, emboldens abuses just by itself. I believe Bandy told me that there's been some innovations in Great Britain where they've opened up the family court proceedings and the amount of complaints is diminished by 50% overnight. So how do we do this? At least at present, you know, the US Supreme Court has not held that there's a First Amendment right at family court level as opposed to criminal trials to attend. But I believe this is a case of legislative reform. There's no reason why state legislatures can't demand that family court matters be held open. There's just one exception I would suggest. If there's fact-finding that publicity would cause direct, immediate, and irreparable physical or mental harm, you could close the proceeding just for that purpose. But that is essential, that there be openness and transparency. It encourages responsible behavior. It deters wrongdoing. Now, a second element here, I believe, there was an expert, Henry Wigmore, he said cross-examination is the greatest engine ever discovered to obtain truth, cross-examination. And I believe, again, that there should be no participant in a family court hearing that can escape cross-examination. Again, absent a factual finding that the cross-examination would create imminent danger of irreparable direct harm to physical and mental safety and comfort. Those, in my judgment, would probably cure a very large percentage of all the injustices that you can chronicle here at this meeting. I don't think that chronicling them provides therapy for everyone. I don't want to be callous, but it doesn't move the ball forward because we all know that this is not anything novel. The kind of tragedies you saw on the film that you can recount today, they're over and over and over again. It's not something new on the block like AI, and there's something that's structurally wrong in the family court system. One of the things that might be considered in family court is a right to trial by jury, or at least an advisory jury. So you just don't have one person there. If you have a jury cross-section, I think you'll get people who are engaged. They'll be more sympathetic and understanding. They won't have nearly the arbitrariness of the single judges that you find at present. And moreover, there's a deliberative element. You have different persons from different backgrounds. You could even have at least an advisory jury as opposed to binding jury. That happens in criminal justice regularly, where a jury will recommend a sentence to a judge, but it's not binding. And I'm suggesting that these as ideas. I'm always reminded that we never want to propose a cure that's worse than the disease. And whenever you have an innovation, we're not brilliant enough to foresee every contingency, and we need to be careful that we don't make things worse, even though our intent is pure. There's also, I believe, we should have a system of a right to counsel. If a parent, a party, doesn't have sufficient funds in the criminal justice system, generally you have a right to counsel paid by the government. There ought to be a right to counsel in family court as well, including, I believe, counsel. I've argued a constitutional right of a child to have independent counsel. The best interest of the child is the typical standard, and the child doesn't even have a right to independent counsel. It seems a little bit odd. You can't suggest that someone else can stand in the child's shoes. The parents have their own ulterior motives agenda that may be similar to the child's, but it's not the same. This is something that I believe we can clearly afford and is essential. Right now, oftentimes, if you don't have money, your opponent can hire talented, gifted attorneys. If you don't have an attorney, there are issues, technical issues of evidence and motions is going to escape you. It becomes a very unjust system. And here, I think, we can try to compare, the importance of the issues at stake in family law. When we're speaking of child custody and very, very intense family relationships with the criminal justice system. So criminal justice kind of has the highest tier of procedural protections. But I think if you take away the dollar figure, that perhaps family court involves more intense psychological stress, anxiety, impact on a person's life, other than criminal justice. Maybe in some cases more. Your entire life could be destroyed with injustice at the family code level. And therefore, if the criminal justice system can provide these protections, the same ought to obtain in the family court system. In some sense, it's equally, if not more important, because you can imagine in your own experience that because of the personal investment involved, and oftentimes the rank or the reason why you're in family court is because something is dysfunctional in the family situation. Otherwise, you wouldn't be in court. And so we need to remember that for that reason, the need for care and scrutiny of what's being said is at its zenith. And that means, I say, the right to cross-examination, including children from time to time. But when we're undertaking these innovations, oftentimes out of caution, we have pilot programs. We don't say we've jumped, we've discovered the law of gravity at the first mathematical equation like Isaac Newton. It took a long time. And so we need to make certain that we reevaluate, these innovations. Are they working? Are they not? So we don't end up, again, going down a wrong path. You can do that with sunset laws. 3 or 4 years, you come back and revise the system. Transparency, is the cross-examination working? Is the jury trial working? Something of that sort. You can even start, I believe, pilot projects start out in one state, which can then be served as a model for other states. There is a group called the Commission on Uniform State Laws. When I was in law school, we learned about the Uniform Commercial Code. It's not binding on all states. We could find Uniform Family Code as being a model for legislatures to embrace and adopt. But I want to suggest also, other elements that come into play, I think are important with regard to how do we select, family court judges. It's very important, in part because, and I don't want to speak in any way that's condescending, family court judges are not usually the people who graduate from Harvard and Yale in top class and sit on the U.S. Supreme Court, because it doesn't carry that prestige. I've been in family court before, and I'm not overly impressed with the intellectual brilliance of the judges. So that means that we need to be careful about perhaps a new way to recruit and appoint family court judges. One way to consider it, typically you appoint judges or you elect judges. And sometimes you appoint judges and they're up for retention election. And then it differed about, do they serve 6 years or 8 years or whatever? Should there be a retirement so you get new blood in the system? I believe all these things need to be re-examined because at present, it seems to me you may know more because you have more experience sitting in there. There's kind of incestuous relationships among all those who are working in the family court system. They all scratch each other's back, they know each other. There needs to be some outside scrutiny that will cause them. That's one of the reasons why transparency is so important here. But again, I'm just suggesting ideas that would be considered in writing, a new family code, if you will. Now, one of the other things to think about in regards to having a higher quality of judge in addressing family court matters is maybe we should have the family issues put on the agenda of the regular circuit or trial courts. Why do we have just special family court? Which means they come with a very narrow mind. In the regular civil justice system, in the federal system, one judge handles all sorts of cases, ranging from breach of contract to antitrust to securities laws to gender discrimination. And if you have a generalized experience and background, you may bring more enlightenment to a situation without prejudice than you do if you just have one kind of case. It's rather unusual in our system of justice that the jurisdiction of a court is so limited to just one item. We have tax courts, but those are the exceptions rather than the rule. And I do believe you would probably attract a better quality of judge if the jurisdiction was broader and family law issues were just part of a larger agenda. But again, we don't know for certain. That's why we need to make clear that at the outset we want pilot programs, sunset laws. We need to come back and reevaluate exactly how these situations are working. Now, one of the other elements I believe is disadvantageous to justice is the fact of absolute immunity of the participants. You can't sue them for anything, even if they act out of malice. That seems to me much too broad. I believe that for most government officials, they enjoy good faith immunity from being sued, and I can guarantee you they don't get sued all the time. Lawsuits are a headache, especially for plaintiffs. This idea that if you reduce immunity, suddenly there'll be 1 million lawsuits brought is nonsense. Any lawyer who practices knows there are numerous inhibitions on filing lawsuits. Your entire life is wound up, it's expensive. Who wants that headache? You gotta sit for depositions. And I do believe the absolute immunity that's conferred on judges, on guardian ad litems, should be changed to qualified immunity that's well sufficient for all other government officials. Why should it be different at the family court level? Now, let me also suggest, I believe, that in going forward, we need to have some kind of political strategy. How do we get these issues on the table so you get real traction? One, I think there needs to be an organized effort to get this issue. Your local newspaper, meet with the board of editors. You can have this issue raised at state legislative level with oversight hearings. Those are ways, but you have to be persistent. Write and lobby, go in face to face. This is a very serious problem, and show that you care. It should be an issue that you would want to raise in the election campaigns. Are you for this or that statute? You want to make certain that we come in with state legislature with draft legislation that is respectful and professionally drafted. I do think we probably, my belief is that if you took maybe a half dozen lawyers who are gifted on process, come up with our own uniform family code law that promises, it's not going to cure everything because mankind's made of crooked timber, but at least it would be a huge start. That's what we need to remember. It's never going to be perfect because we're dealing with imperfect human beings, but we can certainly do a lot better than what we're doing now. Family court it's a tragedy. It's kind of goes back to Star Chamber in Great Britain. It's only about 4 centuries old. But I want to underscore again, the status quo has very vigorous defenders. They're benefiting from this. They are not going to idle if we aren't, no matter what we do. We have to have the same organization, the same brains, the same persistence, the same maybe skin in the game, because you're not going to win by philanthropy. Seneca Falls did win by philanthropy. Susan B. Anthony wasn't philanthropy. That doesn't mean we need Elon Musk or George Soros, but it needs people have to care enough about it that they'll have a sustaining effort. The other thing in politics is that, how fast is this going to happen? Nobody knows, because politics is very flukish as to what jumps to the front of the queue and what does not. Things happen every day that can distract legislators. But you need to be committed that you'll stay in it to the very end. I was born in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and early on I was associated with William Garrison, who was a hero in Boston. He, in 1833, established the Liberator magazine. It was viewed the Constitution as a covenant with hell. He was an abolitionist. The first day he established the magazine, he was tarred and feathered and driven out of town. He kept up. He was there in 1865 when the anti-slavery amendment was ratified. He shut down the Liberator after that. But he didn't know it was going to be 32 years. Nobody does. And so if this is going to succeed, everybody needs to be committed. Just ask how long it's going to take, as long as needed. And I repeat again, don't worry. Those who are defending the status quo, they're going to be trying to defend their privileges all the time, 24/7, 365 days a year. So thank you for listening, and I'll be around for the questions.
Thank you, Attorney Fine. Next is Dr. Joanna Silberg, a renowned child psychologist and a leading expert on childhood trauma, who is co-founder and president of the influential Leadership Council.
Thank you very much. I'm a child psychologist, as Dr. Lee just said. I specialize in child abuse. I'm a researcher. I'm a founder of a nonprofit devoted to educating the public about child abuse. And I've been an expert witness in family court in about 31 states. Through my exposure to family court, my clinical work, and my research, I've found that our family court system is severely flawed. Routinely, when allegations of abuse are raised in family court, children are being placed with their abusers. To help illuminate some of the reasons for this huge failure, it is important to understand how widespread abuse is, particularly child sexual abuse. Some studies show that child sexual abuse affects up to 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys, most commonly perpetrated by people that the children know well or family members. When you add in other forms of abuse, like physical abuse, the frequency of abuse in families is even higher. Now keep in mind that half of all marriages end in divorce. Given this high rate of abuse and high rate of divorce in our country, you can see that it is very likely that many children who are in the throes of a severe custody dispute will have been abused. Far too many of these children end up residing with the abusive parent. Judges often mistakenly believe that finding abuse in family court would be rare. Research from my nonprofit organization, the Leadership Council, estimates that 58,000 children a year are placed in the custody of an abusive parent by family court rulings. Significant amounts of academic research and news reports contribute to the mounting evidence of this crisis. This crisis rose to the attention of the Office on Violence Against Women, and they requested research proposals to study the issue. And I was awarded a government grant to study failures of family court, and I published my findings in 2019. I opted to study in depth a series of cases in which children were sent to live with a parent who'd been accused of abuse, and a later court acknowledged the error and returned the child to their safe environment. These cases were studies in massive system failure. These children, with an average age of 6, spent an average amount of 3 years with their abusive parent, suffering more harm, depression, suicidal ideation, dissociation, and many of them engaged in various forms of self-harm. The abusers tended to escalate their behavior during the time the child was in their custody, leading to physical injuries and sometimes criminal convictions. Judges made these initial decisions because abusers are able to manipulate the legal system using tactics such as gaslighting, victim blaming, character assassination, to gain custody of their children. When the abuser alleges that the accusation is a ploy of the other parent to gain custody, judges too often believe them. Yet there is a science to understanding the dynamics of abuse, the symptomatology, how it presents, how disclosures occur. Judges depended heavily on evaluators unfamiliar with abuse dynamics, and they tended to ignore direct testimony from the parents who either witnessed the abuse or were told about the abuse. And the parents described well-known symptoms of abuse and disclosures of the children. When these cases were later reversed and judges were able to acknowledge the previous error, they relied on abuse specialists and evidence-based analysis of symptoms and disclosures of the children. One of the most frightening outcomes that judges sometimes order is severing all connection with the parent trying to protect the child. Judges may order a child to participate in a reunification camp program where they are threatened with consequences unless they reconcile with a parent that they claim was abusive. These children are required to state against their will that their accusations were a lie. Despite the massive ethical problems in such mandated programs, these camps remain legal in most states. The court failures we documented can perpetuate cycles of abuse into future generations. We have a duty to ensure that our family court system is a place of safety and protection for children, not a playground for abusers to continue their reign of terror. So what can we do to address this issue and put an end to the cycle of abuse with our family court system? We heard some wonderful ideas from Attorney Fine, and I urge all of you to brainstorm creative ideas and listen to the ideas presented in this conference. Maybe we could implement mandatory training for judges, lawyers, and court personnel on child abuse prevalence and symptoms. We could enact laws that prioritize children's safety and not parental rights. We could create national databases to document what's happening in family court and document some of these patterns. By enacting meaningful change within our family court system, we can protect children from the horrors of being placed with their abusers and ensure that they have a safe and loving environment in which to thrive. Please listen carefully to the testimony presented here of professionals, journalists, lawyers, survivors, and let the outrage you experience help to fuel your commitment to creative action to reform the broken family court system that too often imperils our children. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Silver. Next is Attorney Karen Winner, an accomplished attorney, champion of consumer rights, and a groundbreaking investigative reporter of the California family court system that kind of broke open to the world what is happening in family courts.
Thank you for having me. I'm a little frog in my throat. Forgive me. I want to give a shout out to the veterans of this country who've given their service, and I also want to give a shout out to the veterans of the court systems who have given their time and efforts to try to make the system more fair. I'm the author of a book called Divorce from Justice. It was the first book that exposed the divorce court industry, how people are often exploited by lawyers and judges whom the system is supposed to protect. Earlier, I wrote the first consumer protection report for New York City to extend basic rights to consumers in divorce cases, basically to protect consumers from their own lawyers. And it's something called the Statement of Client Rights that I wrote and is now institutionalized in New York for about 25 years, where every divorce lawyer has to give the client the Statement of Client Rights so the client knows how to protect themselves from their lawyer. So let me start with some background. We know from research that victims of domestic violence face their greatest risk of being harmed, not during the relationship, but after the relationship. A 2021 study by Friedel found that nearly half, 46% of family-related mass homicides happened after separation. And that's the context for what happens in the courts. Family court is supposed to protect families and reduce conflict, but what I have found through years of research, investigation, and case review is that it too often amplifies the conflict. In every case, lawyers are representing clients in a process that produces winners and losers. And as I documented in this book, which is old enough to be a mother, but unfortunately is still relevant today, the lawyers that people often choose, mainly women, are there mainly for their own financial interest. I coined the term divorce court industry because it's not just the two parties that are dividing up the assets or fighting over their children. It's the lawyers who are profiting from this. And it's really a four-way financial split often with the assets. So in this system of entrenched interests where the protection of the family is not recognized, it gets even worse because the legal profession is self-regulated and there's really no guardrails to protect people from unscrupulous lawyers or from judges who overstep their power. So a woman who's been abused, who's just trying to protect her children, can walk into a courtroom expecting justice. Instead, she finds herself punished again. She can be forced into debt, sanctioned, stripped of her rights by the very court that's supposed to protect her. In truth, the family court has become the new arena where domestic violence continues. Only now it's legalized. When the abuser can no longer reach his target directly, he uses the court to do it for him. He enlists a judge, a lawyer, custody evaluator to carry out the same control and coercion, but this time it's through rulings, it's through orders, and it's through fees. In this way, the family court becomes the enabler of continued abuse. And the judges, they have almost unlimited power. As we heard, judges cannot be sued civilly for damages, even when they act maliciously or corruptly. This means a judge can do almost anything. They can do almost anything they want, knowing that they are not going to be held accountable. I've seen this as an investigator, and I've seen this as a lawyer. And there's very little a person can do to challenge it. In the late 1990s, citizen groups in South Carolina and California hired me to investigate allegations of misconduct by judges, evaluators, and guardians ad litem. Citizen groups formed a collective in order to pool their resources to commission me so that I could research what was going on, where the media would not dare to go. I conducted 3 separate investigations in Sacramento, San Jose, and Marin counties. People came forward, mothers, fathers, grandparents, to share their cases. They did so at great personal risk. In many states, family court files are sealed and judges can issue gag orders against anyone who speaks publicly. Women know if they anger the judge, they can lose their child or children entirely. So when these parents, when they chose to come forward, it really was an enormous act of courage. And the media, too, has been afraid to cover this issue. Reporters, they fear being accused of bias or interfering with a judicial ruling. They're afraid of being sued. But what I learned is that when you gather patterns, When you show not just one case, but you show 8, 9, 10 cases with the same judge, the same evaluator, the same harm, it becomes undeniable. And that's when the sunlight breaks through. And the results were powerful. In Marin County, within 6 days of the release of my report, the judge that I investigated left the bench in family law, never to return again. The same happened with the commissioner who had quasi-judicial powers and heard many, many children. The same day that my report was issued, she resigned. So that's what the sunlight does. It disinfects, it protects, it reforms the entrenched interests, and we know there are entrenched interests of the legal profession, the unchecked power of judges. These are formidable barriers. But transparency, truth-telling, and citizen action work. The lesson is this: when people come together, when they refuse to be silenced, when they expose patterns of harm instead of isolated stories, change becomes possible. So my message today is simple. We cannot continue to allow our courts to operate in the darkness. We cannot allow secrecy to shield injustice. The family court must be accountable to the people, not to itself. Because justice at its heart is not a private matter, it's a public trust. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Winter. Next is Mr. Rory Doyle, an accomplished healthcare consultant, entrepreneur, and now director of the Institute of Forensic Science, dedicated to bringing medical rigor to family court proceedings. He will share with us his marketing research.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. Dr. Lee, thank you for the incredible work you do on a daily basis for exposing really the brutality of family court. It's an honor to partner with you on this mission to educate, advocate, and protect innocent children and loving mothers and fathers who have been really targeted and abused in a corrupt system. I've gone through this personally, so I can relate to both mothers and fathers. I have 3 young children. I walked into a courtroom, and a corrupt forensic psychologist by the name of Dr. Jessica Byron Caverly fabricated a mental health diagnosis without a shred of verifiable evidence. She contradicted all objective medical records, weaponized her license, overruled Ivy League medical doctors. Not only what she did was unlawful, but medically impossible. So she is the textbook example of why these evaluators need to be held accountable. And I think everyone knows in family court is by design a very generic and subjective environment. The reason for that is when you empower an opinion that is not tied to any evidence or scientific criteria, you enable corruption. And what my data is showing that these are prefabricated, predetermined outcomes. It's painfully obvious, I think, everyone that has been through this. The evaluators that are put into place are incompetent, they're corrupt, and they have no validity on what they're saying. So again, you empower an opinion, you are promoting and incentivizing fraud. And these are the individuals that the court heavily relies on for outcomes. So these are the individuals that conceal abuse, they can manufacture an illness that does not exist, and the judges or guardians completely rely on them. So I know we're short on time, but I'm going to walk you through some very compelling data. So, like I said, the biggest misconception of family court is that it is a complex and evidence-based environment. The reality is it's a very simple model for scalability. This is about money. I think everyone knows that. And when you empower a corrupt evaluator, they can literally fabricate anything without being checked. So, Dr. Lee and I have partnered with the Institute of Forensic Science to bring scientific integrity to these evaluations that are really so critical for the safety of children. We recently did some market research, and we'll have more granular data over the next 3 to 6 months, but this pattern is remarkably predictable and consistent. Now, if you are alleging abuse and there's nothing against you, the easiest way to rewrite history and to point the finger is for an evaluation. So I know many of you have walked into a room, you've left with some mysterious illness that has no evidence attached to it. That is fraud. As we know, we're not dealing with insurance. There's no criteria. I mean, I think this is the biggest private pay healthcare scam in the country, and I think the evidence will show that. So in 134 cases, high conflict where one parent or both parents are concerned with the safety of children, every single case had a forensic evaluator, mostly psychologists, some sort of therapist. Not a single time was a forensic psychiatrist put on initially. Someone like Dr. Lee, who is, family courts aren't thrilled when they see her because she deals with objective evidence, empirical data, and a case that will last 5 minutes can extend 10, 15 years where everyone makes money. So not a single trained medical practitioner is put on initially. 100% of the evaluations relied on multiple choice questionnaires. I think people have taken these, MMPIs. It's so embarrassing, frankly, that courts don't recognize what's going on. You walk in, 15 minutes, fill out a multiple choice question set, and you're given some mysterious, whether it be a personality disorder, borderline, bipolar, whatever it is, but uniformly, the objective records are never included with those really absurd diagnostic recommendations. And 100% of the time, in 134 cases, the evaluator does not provide the raw data from the test. You fill out the test, the evaluator alleges a score. They're not even providing verification of what they're doing, which is, again, embarrassing. So no raw data, not a single time is the objective medical history. These evaluators are able to rewrite, literally create a new clinical reality, conceal abuse, and place children in harm, and that's what they're doing. So no medical records, no objective data. Shockingly, all of the outcomes also align with the abuser. Who has a bigger financial incentive to rewrite history and conceal evidence than someone who is abusing their children? I speak to mothers all day that their children are being sexually abused. I mean, this is clear, disturbing, and graphic, or physically harmed, and they go in to try and protect their children, and they lose custody altogether. And this happens for fathers and mothers. They are forced into supervised visitation. Again, no evidence. They're forced into mandated therapy. They are, it is literally not just about the fraudulent diagnosis. The next step is the forced compliance, where the evaluator will weaponize access to your children by following a lie. And I know, unfortunately, many parents are forced into that. They think it's going to get better, but it gets worse, because that goes on the record as something that's scientific and credible. So, the process, and this is not local, we're building a national database here. Typically, the data has been somewhat fragmented, but I think what we're seeing here is this is a uniform pattern. The legal and medical violations, these are published state laws. I have a psychologist in Connecticut who gave one victim a bipolar diagnosis, removed another working bipolar diagnosis from an Ivy League trained psychiatrist, trivialized the suicide attempt, and is really just the perfect example of someone who can really weaponize that access to the court. So, under both state and federal law, these providers are making medical diagnoses that are not, again, possible. They're unlawful, they're unscientific, and these are easily determined by finance. So the financial incentive structure is very clear. if you take someone like Dr. Lee with her credibility, these cases would be over in 5 minutes. The evidence is there. When you put a fraud in front of the court, who's either literally deceiving a public official, which is a criminal act. We recently had a psychologist from Colorado sent to prison, and we need to see more of that. This is not accidental. This is not just incompetence. This is very predetermined. So once you put that evaluator in place, think about who that feeds. You're feeding both attorneys. You're feeding the guardian ad litem. I've never seen one case in hundreds where a GAL and an evaluator disagree. How is that possible? Those are 2 separate investigations. Uniformly, they agree because it looks like from a quick view that the court did an appropriate intervention. So these evaluators they need to be held accountable. I think the quickest way for justice is to focus on the science of what's going on. You know, any parent out there knows you have a history. A parent who's 30, 40, 50 years old, there's a medical history there. For some interesting reason, the evaluators never provide that history with the report. Why do you think that is? Because their narrative will not align with the objective data. So these people need to be exposed and held accountable. We're building a national database, and again, this is simple for scalability. This is about money, and children right now, as we speak, are with their abuser. Absolutely no question. And that's all due to finance. So I think we need to focus in on the science. And, you know, like I said, thank you guys very much for your time. This is really a national issue. And I think states can intervene on this stuff. They are required to know their state laws, and they can easily investigate the credibility of these allegations. So, you know, I'm not just fighting for my children, I'm fighting for yours, and I'm honored to be working with Dr. Lee. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Doyle. Next is Ms. Ali Toyos, a trailblazing youth organizer who has been organizing youth for the Center for Judicial Excellence. Those who know this organization, it's extremely influential in documenting child murders in the case of custody disputes. And she probably single-handedly opened up the awareness on reunification camps, camps that sever well-bonded relationships in order to isolate children with their abusers. Yes.
Hello, thank you all for having me. Yes, so at 14, I found the courage to protect my younger sister and myself by reporting our father's abuse. I believed what I'd always been told, that the police are there to protect you, and that family court is an institution built to keep children safe. But through the window of the police cruiser, I watched my father laugh with the same officer and court-appointed case manager who had just threatened to send me to juvenile detention if I refused to endure his abuse. Though their threat proved empty, that day shattered any illusion I had of protection. For the first time, I saw the truth of family court, a system that would ignore my pleas and profit from my pain. Even so, I knew that silence wasn't an option. My parents divorced when I was 8 years old, and I watched as my father transformed into a different person. In his eyes, my mother left him, and he hated her for it. Revenge became his sole focus, and he knew that the most effective way to hurt my mother was to hurt her children. It started with manipulation. He called my mom a whore. He said that she would never love us as much as she loved our stepfather. And he made us feel guilty and ashamed for caring about our mom. But soon his behavior devolved into physical, sexual, and emotional abuse of me and my younger sister. By the time I was in middle school, he had become predatory, stalking, threatening, and even breaking into my mother's home to intimidate her. It was out of fear for our safety that I first reported our father's abuse to our guardian ad litem and court-appointed therapist. I believed that once the court knew what was happening, they would take action to protect us, but instead, we were repeatedly dismissed, told that we were lying, and left to defend ourselves against an increasingly volatile and dangerous abuser. My sister and I realized that the court wouldn't prioritize our safety over the wants of our abuser. We ran away. In response, our father used the pseudo theory of parental alienation as a legal defense, falsely claiming that our mom had poisoned me and my sister against him. Instead of investigating the abuse, the court immediately ordered that my sister and I be trafficked into his custody through the reunification camp building Family Bridges. In front of a municipal building in Kansas, hired transport agents tore me and my younger sister from our mom, taking us across the country to Montana, where the camp was run out of a hotel. While in the custody of the transport agents, I was treated like a prisoner. They watched me constantly, even refusing me privacy in the bathroom. They kept me in the dark, telling me nothing beyond the next leg of the trip. They threatened to physically restrain me if I tried to escape or ask for help. They kept me and my sister separated, only allowing us brief visits as a rewards for staying silent and compliant in our own kidnapping. I was terrified, too afraid to eat or sleep, and only later did I realize that this was intentional, that the camp's methods work best on kids who are too scared and exhausted to resist. For the entirety of the 4-day camp, the reunification camp leaders employed psychological torture techniques designed to break us and coerce our silence. They withheld food, water, and sleep until we agreed to comply with the program, and when we resisted, they threatened to separate and send us to psychiatric facilities or wilderness camps. The reunification camp leaders had already succeeded in kidnapping and trafficking us across the country, and all with the support of the family court system. We knew that they had the power and the means to follow through on their promises. Following the camp, we returned to our father's home in Kansas, trapped in his custody and isolated from our mom by a no-contact order that lasted 7 months. We were forced to fake happiness and ignore the continued abuse, becoming complicit in our own erasure to survive. When I turned 18 and escaped my father's reach, I discovered other survivors like me. Family court and the reunification camp had convinced me that my experiences were shameful and unspeakable, that even if I found the courage to tell the truth, no one would believe me. Despite this, I became determined to ensure that no other family court survivor felt isolated and disbelieved as I once did. I began speaking with journalists and sharing my story publicly, becoming the first reunification camp survivor to do so on social media. This led me to create the advocacy initiative CJE Youth Speak with Center for Judicial Excellence, driven by the goal of providing the knowledge, resources, and support that I desperately needed while navigating family court. I learned to use my voice to protect others, educate the public, and build a community of survivors, knowing these systems thrive in darkness and seclusion. And through my advocacy at work, I have met countless other survivors, and in speaking with them, I can unequivocally say that reunification camps do not work, and they do not promote healthy relationships between a parent and a child. They're simply a means for abusers to buy back the custody of their children. And so I have been advocating, and I recommend a national reunification camp ban. And I believe that, I'm sure that people will come back and say, oh, well, what would you insist on instead? You know, there are ways to do therapy that can be helpful, although right now reunification therapy is often conducted similarly to the camps. So I believe that, you know, I may not be the best. I'm sure we need child psychologists and survivors and everyone on the team to be able to come up with a solution that keeps kids safe while, you know, seeing where the abuse is and having parents take responsibility for that abuse and also keeping children safe. So, thank you.
Next is Miss Mia Ambrose. Miss Ambrose is 19 years old. She's newly emerging from 6 years of silencing by the Connecticut family courts. She was an international gymnast representing the United States, flourishing under her mother's care when she was taken. And Her life was sunk into substance use and self-harm. Now she is flourishing again. So.
Good afternoon, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. My name is Mia Ambrose, and everything I share today is supported by 6 years of documented evidence collected by me and my 2 brothers, Matthew and Sawyer, who still remain with their abuser. We have waited years to be heard, not only as victims of abuse, but as witnesses to the collusion among court-appointed experts, and how the family court system sacrifices the very children it claims to protect. My brothers and I were raised in Connecticut primarily by our mother, Karen Reardon, loving, consistent, and dedicated to our well-being. Our father, Christopher Ambrose, lived and worked in California for much of our childhood. At age 4, I lost my hearing in my right ear. This invisible disability taught me to rely on awareness, intuition, and observation, skills that would later help me recognize danger and survive it. On April 24th, 2020, everything changed, based on a fraudulent custody report written by psychologist Jessica Byron Caverly. Judge Jane Grossman ordered that my brothers and I be removed from my mother's care. The hearing that took us away was never completed. My mother was never reported to DCF, never found unfit, and never accused of abuse or neglect. Yet that day, our family was destroyed. We were told we would stay at our father's for the weekend. We never went home again. From that day forward, we lived under total control and isolation. We were cut off from our mother, no visit, no calls, not even her name was allowed to be spoken. We were relocated to a new town and school where no one knew us, no one knew our history, and Chris Ambrose rewrote it. When we sought help from schools, police, and DCF, our reports were ignored. False information was entered into records to protect him and discredit us and our mother. The consequences were devastating. Medical and school records show that under his control, we became depressed, anxious, suicidal, and withdrawn. I began self-harming. We missed school, failed classes, and grades went down, and we started turning to drinking, anything to numb the pain. And every sign of abuse was dismissed. In 2021, after my brothers and I reported sexual abuse, a forensic investigation confirmed we were victims and that all 3 of us were unsafe in our father's home. The multidisciplinary team, including DCF, police, and forensic interviewers, recommended our immediate removal. But within a day, we were forced back to our abuser. The punishment that followed was severe. Because he could have been criminally charged, our phones were confiscated for over a year, and there was no house phone. We were isolated from everyone who cared about us. The abuse and surveillance intensified, and those sworn to protect us stood silent. By 2024, at age 17, I fled his home for the 5th and final time. I left with nothing. No ID, no money, no belongings, but I knew staying meant not surviving. When I turned 18, I gained access to my records and confirmed that the findings of abuse have been deliberately concealed to protect those responsible. Since escaping, I've begun to rebuild my life. I reunited with my mom, and having her back in my life has given me strength and healing I didn't know was possible. I have a job I thrive in. I earned my driver's license, a symbol of freedom and independence after years of control. I've traveled, I've met incredible people, and I experienced the world for the first time on my own terms. I even met my boyfriend, someone who treats me with kindness and respect, who reminds me what healthy love feels like. And yet, even with all this growth and hope, I found it's not the same without my brothers. I love them deeply, and not a day passes that I don't think about them. I will never stop speaking up about the truth and what happened to us and make sure that it is known until they too have the chance to live free and be heard. What happened to my family is not an isolated tragedy.
It reflects a systematic failure. Across the country, children are being traumatized by inhumane court orders. Protective parents are being vilified and erased, and the truth is being rewritten to protect those with power. Family court is meant to serve the best interests of the children, but when false narratives are accepted as fact, when evidence is hidden, and with financial influence overrides truth, childhoods are destroyed. Children learn that they are not valued as human beings, that they are not to be lived joyfully but endured. I stand before you today, not only as a survivor, but as an advocate, because drastic and immediate change is needed in this corrupt system, not just for me and my brothers, but for every child whose words and feelings have been disregarded, for every parent falsely accused and stripped of their right to raise their children in a safe and loving household. Thank you for listening and giving me the chance to speak for those who cannot.
Thank you to all speakers. And we can now open a round table. If anyone on the panel would like to ask a question of the panelists. Attorney Vine?
Just like to make the observation about the lack of science. In the federal system, there's called the Daubert test, which requires rigorous scientific consensus that whatever is being taught satisfies the 95% certainty standard. And it would be worth considering importing the Daubert standard into the family court system. And that can be done by legislation. It's a rule of evidence that's very critical to keeping junk science out of courtrooms. Why do you comment on whether you think that would be useful?
I tried in my case, so apparently she met the criteria, so we tried that challenge, and that is the problem with that dynamic. Even if you're presenting something that makes sense legally, these evaluators are very integrated into the system.
And it calls to mind, again, you can't, if you don't have good people, even if you have the greatest standards in the world written down, it's not self-executing. You can corrupt and include everything that if you wish to. And that's why it's important to focus on, who are these judges? How do they get selected? Do we need jury trials? That's why transparency is so critical here. And we know that they're going to try to protect their little domains. They're like despots, and they get an adrenaline high, in some sense, by bullying all the litigants before them. But the correction has got to come from the state legislatures. You need to have new ways of appointing, supervising, and regulating these family courts. And that's why you have to be involved at the local newspaper level. The legislators respond to public opinion. You've got to raise this and be there, be calm. We know that there are injustices, but to be candid for the court reporter or the newspaper or the broadcaster, okay, well, what are you going to do about it? Okay, there have been homicides since Cain killed Abel. Well, that's bad, but it's going to continue unless you have a new structural approach. Say it's the institutions rather than personalities that need to change.
I just want to respond to that quickly. I think what's very interesting, in a private pay world, I've worked in commercial insurance for 25 years, if an orthopedic surgeon saw you and gave you a spinal fusion, I don't think the insurance company would pay for that. So there's no criteria, there's no evidence, there's a disconnect from rudimentary science. So I feel like we need to carve out the evaluators from the system because they won't speak up. Their tactics are completely indefensible, medically and lawfully. They're violating state law in public. and they're not being held accountable. So I think if you match the objective records with the diagnostic conclusions, they're not going to match up. And I don't think, because that evidence is never provided.
But then what you're underscoring is the importance of transparency. You've got to have people fear that their incompetence, their evil will be disclosed. It won't cure everything, but it will cure a very substantial percentage. And that's why I just think, as a matter of strategy here, tactics, start out with a pilot program, and it works. Say, okay, maybe he's not, because the other side will create horror stories. Oh, if we change this, the sky is going to fall. All the lies that are told to classify information. Then when it comes out, nothing ever happens. So we need to be shrewd in knowing how we're going to be able to get this sold. And all right, well, let's do a pilot program, see what happens, and at least extrapolate from what's happening in Great Britain, some of the other jurisdictions. Obviously, we're not in a situation where we have a perfect system we're trying to disturb. It's clearly broken. We don't want to make it worse, but it's hard to dispute. Anybody can see that the system needs some kind of repair. Well, why don't we start on this program?
In New York, a few years ago, a blue ribbon panel came to the conclusion that court evaluators should be banned from doing evaluations. I see heads nodding. We know about this report. It went to the governor, and she did not sign on to it. And it's sitting there, and the cars are still accruing, children are dying. I had a mother call me this morning who doesn't want to go public, and she sees her child 1 hour a week because, and I was representing her, because she reported alleged abuse to the authorities. Hospital investigated, it was proven insubstantial, but the network of professionals were so adamant about punishing her that they took custody away, so she sees her child in the space of it looks like a bathroom area. And this the child's grades have dropped. The girl has medical condition, and it's just one of hundreds of cases through the years that we all know what the problem is, but there has to be the political will. I mean, professionals came together. They were steamed. They said no more court evaluators in New York until we figure out why children are being murdered after court evaluators are saying that it's okay to be with the abuser. So the governor's holding this report, nothing happens. So where do we get the political will? How do we do that? What is it going to take to do that?
Well, it's got to have people who are sustained. Politicians have short attention spans, be there every day in their face. I go back and it does suggest disappointment. You know how long it took to get rid of an evil as blatant as slavery, or having women treated as chattels? This is 50, 70, 100 years. And now they were campaigning all of the time. Now sometimes reforms come more rapidly, but there are a lot of flukish things in politics. And you just have to be sustained, make the argument, don't be nasty, disputatious, point out the evils, and don't stop. Now, I understand when you're just one individual, it's like casting one vote when you have hundreds of men. Well, it's not going to make a difference. Well, you can't have that attitude. Collectively, it does make a difference. When we first started the opposition to the Vietnam War, well, that's never going to win. But ultimately, it did through teachings. But it took a fair amount of time. We have to be patient and not expect, well, I'm not going to do it unless I know in a week's time something's going to happen. Now, I always take inspiration myself. This is July 4th, 1776. We're going to be celebrating the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, which is why we're here today. We're not living under a British king, right? previously Queen. On that day, 56 signatories signed their death warrants. He said, you know, if we lose here, we're going to be killed by the British for unalienable rights that we enjoy today. They took that risk. I'm not asking you to take that risk. But that's why we have a country. It's called the Declaration of Independence. You know, you have to fight for it every day. Ben Franklin asked about our rights and liberties. He said, well, at the Constitutional Convention concluded, a republic if you can keep it. So you have to have that obligation and intensity. And that's what gave America birth, right? If you don't continue that kind of spirit, we're going off the rails. And you can see it at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue right now.
If I may add, there's also sunlight. As you mentioned, Justice Brandeis said that sunlight is the best of disinfectants, because what's really happening here is a form of slavery. Children are sold to their physical, sexual slavery until they reach majority. And if the public were to get hold of this awareness, I think many things would change.
Thank you, Dr. Lee. I do think, you know, the states that speak out about the Constitution and protecting children, this is apolitical. This is about the safety of children. If you're not looking at your backyard, why aren't the leaders walking down the street and going to family court? There's a ton of money that's generated for the states, but the hypocrisy of some of the leaders that stand out there and talk about the safety of children and the Constitution, and they've got, there's incredible evidence of the violations going on 10 feet away. And I do think these solutions are practical. They're not grandiose, we just need integrity. The states should audit all of the evaluators. That's a very simple mechanism. I'm sure people would do that for free. It doesn't take capital, it just takes trust and integrity. So if they're not analyzing the problem and they're looking away, that's the complexity that we've had to this point. But you know, I mean, some of this stuff is so egregious, and as we stay together, like Dr. Lee said, there's no goodwill in this business. You have to continue to move forward, tell your story that's backed by verifiable evidence, and I think what we're going to see is a national pattern that's remarkably predictable.
I think what you've suggested also, the need for inspector generals, that's what we have in the federal system. Inspector generals are there to be kind of an internal audit, if you will, that can handle complaints and don't have any vested interest, you know, in the family court situation as it is. But anyway, we need to be bold and say, listen, we may have it wrong. Let's do a pilot program. Let's have one success story. I'm convinced the way politics works, we get it in one jurisdiction that works, it'll go viral. Everyone said, wow, that really, really demonstrates things. And part it's because the nature of the human being, you know, experience is a lot more important than just intellectualizing and theories of X, Y, Z. And if you show it in fact works, then everybody will be for it. And that's why we actually have to have it implemented rather than just talking about it and saying in theory it seems to work. But it's all everybody in this room and getting your neighbors, you know, convinced that it's worth the effort to put in some real time and sacrifice. It's for the kids after all.
And I would mention that the kids play a great role. The youth, in fact, who are bravely beginning to speak up and making changes in national awareness. Now I'm sure there are burning questions for the panelists. There's a hand here that's been up for a while. The microphone is coming to you.
Hi, my name is Roberta Eisen, and I'm a co-founder of the DC Children's Institute. And my question is, with Dr. Blackstone, who's sitting right here. My question is, let's take a reality check. Okay, we're in DC. We're well connected with the DC courts. I'm connected with Pennsylvania courts. We both have experience in Virginia and Maryland. We have gone to everyone right now. There is such chaos in DC. No one is interested in this. We have been seeking funding. If you have anywhere, when we started this 3 years ago, I was told and advised that there was lots of federal money available for children and family. And that was 3 years ago, almost 4 years ago, and here we are struggling to get funding. Everyone, including the bar associations, are struggling, and the big legal firms. They're struggling to survive with their own chaos in this world. So where do we begin? I'd love to put a program into DC courts, but I don't have the money to do it. I have the access to the courts, but no one has the money. We've done training for the judges. No one has the money. They're receptive, but there is no money to implement anything. I've implemented the children's program, the adult program in DC courts. We just did our first live program in 5 years, and now it's down again because of the federal thing, because of the federal shutdown. What is reality now, today? Sorry.
Well, the fact is that the funding, the availability, the volunteer services are an earmark of how much people care. You think that the people, Lloyd Garrison, got funding to be an abolitionist and get anything at all? And that was a horror story far worse than what we're discussing here, though maybe it's very comparable. And I think it's a commentary if we aren't putting money there, but we put lots of money into killing everybody around the world, the military-industrial complex. It means we need to change the culture. It's a very, very large challenge. But I mean, my view is that unfortunately, we put very, very little money into wisdom, character, critical thinking, and vast sums in training people to be more proficient in killing other people. That's global. The world, human beings spend about 100 times more on killing each other than on learning and being benevolent to kids who are in need. That tells you a lot. I read in the recent article called Omnicide. Omnicide means destroying the entire population. And that's what we're about. Now, that's not any solace to you, but it shows the problem is we need ultimately to change the culture. So people would get huge tax deductions for giving to you, but nothing for giving $150 million to support the military to go kill people who are unthreatening to us. That's an issue much, much larger than this particular problem, but we got to go back to the source. That is the fact. In some sense, people will just have to be satisfied to the extent that they can be philanthropists, do it voluntarily without getting paid at all. I mean, I'm a citizen. I spend a huge amount of my time not getting paid trying to enforce the Constitution against the highest people in the land. Well, that's my obligation as a citizen. I don't enforce it on others. That's the way progress gets made. I don't think at Seneca Falls in 1848, there was a woman, they said, who's going to fund this? Susan B. Anthony did not live in a palace. So it's unfair in life in some sense, but we got to do it.
Hi, my name is Patricia Highland Drawman. I'm from Evanston, Illinois. I had a divorce in 2004 after 9 days of trial. We're all surviving. And I recently won custody of my daughter, June 2nd. She's 15. Our family's abuser cannot see her. His name is Locke Bowman. He is a very famous civil rights attorney. I'm his fourth wife. On March 26th, he punched me in the face at the Omni Hotel in DC. We were on spring break, and I was treated at Sibley's for a concussion. I spoke with Detective Jennifer Barba, and she's of District 2. She said to me, because I called her with hours before the statute was up. I just didn't know how things worked. She said, our family's suffering too, and I can't even help my loved one who is a victim of coercive control and domestic violence. But I did have Dr. Lisa Fontes as an expert. I worked with Dr. Christine Koshiola. I worked with Dr. Sandy Davenport Belushi, who was assaulted by Jim Belushi. She was my therapist the first time in 2004, and then I resumed my care and treatment with her in 2023. I worked with Dr. Steph Sloan from a Child's Voice Project. I continue to work with her. Suzanne Chester, who's an attorney, I think they founded the group together. I think that what we're hearing, I was just at Beerman Family Law for a whole kind of conference symposium in Chicago, Illinois, about domestic violence and how do we handle these situations. And many people are talking about how children do need to go to their local CACs. Is that what it's called? I'm sorry, I don't even know. Is that what we call our health?
Can you?
Yes.
I'm sorry. Can you direct your question to?
Yes. What I am hearing, and I want to hear what you have to say, is this is slavery. This is an epidemic, as you have titled this as. There isn't time to wait. She cannot wait. Our daughter has been writing papers. She is getting advocacy. Kenton Gerard has filed federal lawsuits in our area. And their daughters have worked with Dr., I don't know if you know the Gerard daughters, Gwen, and they have started they're seniors at Muir High School. It's over. It's over. The game is over. Everyone's rodeo, it's over. They're outed. It's done. We need a panel of psychiatrists and psychologists and social workers and educators and people who will evaluate children, and not only children, but any protective parent. It's not just about the children, it's about our families. And if you want less violence in the world, then you should probably, right? We all have to start listening to the library card. My two greatest things is my library card and my vacuum cleaner. Among all the 6 children in our family, right? Because there's a 37-year-old stepson, a 46-year-old stepson, and mine are 25, 30, and 34, and they're beside themselves. They can't believe what their father and stepfather has done. Anyway, the question is, are we going to just start to talk about how it could just be over now? It doesn't work at all.
Yes. Would anyone like to answer?
You have to get outside of your boxes. You're in boxes. You're lawyers. You're in a box.
Well, everyone has a role to play. James Madison said if we had angels, we wouldn't need government at all. So we're dealing with crooked timber. That's why I focus on structural changes. We can't depend upon personalities and having Jesus, delivering the Sermon on the Mount and having everybody turn the other cheek. Is it going to be a perfect system? No. That's what I'm keep explaining here. Everybody has, a very tragic story to tell. We don't want to demean or disrespect any of them. But if we're going to change the dynamic, we need to think of the structure that causes, this chronic abuses. And probably you're just the tip of the iceberg, I'm sure. You're bold, you're courageous, you took your time and effort to travel here. Many would be intimidated or they're already in despair. So we know it's far worse than this, but that's why we have to use our brains to say, all right, this is how we're going to correct it.
This is also why we're trying to bring this to the national level, because the same amount of efforts being spent instead of individual cases to the structural level to prevent this from happening in the first place, we find works very effectively and more rapidly than we believe. Now, there are lots of hands up. We'll ask to limit your questions to 1 minute, please. There's a hand over there.
Hi, I'm Janice Grenadier. I'm a certified ADA advocate, and I have been a victim, like many of you, illegally jailed, held in solitary and whatnot. I think we have to look for the solutions, which these panel appear to be doing, which I think is great. I see the solution being our grand jury. Our grand jury is our fourth arm of government. We are supposed to be able to take our complaints in there. It's a fight though. I've been fighting it for a long time. The other thing I see is, as an ADA advocate, the judges do not have immunity. Majority of lawyers hate us because we can point out the deficiencies. I have a petition in to have our Chief Justice Roberts removed, impeached, because he has brought a foreign influence into our country called the ends of court. That's a huge thing. I do have the case up on judicialpedia.com. You can put your cases up there, but the solutions that we have are there, but one person can't do it. It's so nice to see this room full and full of people who want to get to the solution. So my question to you all is, what do you see as the solution? Is it an ADA advocate being allowed to do it? Because legal abuse syndrome comes under the ADA, which every person in here who has had to deal with this has. Oh, to a particular panel? I don't know who to address it to, I apologize. I'll leave it to any of the panel that's a lawyer that thinks they would,
Attorney Winter?
would support an ADA advocate to work with you and your client.
I also do ADA advocacy, and I can tell you that some of the court systems, including New York's court system, have taken upon themselves to create unlawful policy to say that judges cannot be sued for their administrative actions, as in cases where they are approving disabilities, accommodations for people. And I'm not sure if everybody knows about how important it is for people who have PTSD or other problems such as ADHD, cognitive issues, to be able to get accommodations in court so that they're not, so that they're able to participate with the help of an ADA advocate. And it's something that I and a group of lawyers have been fighting for in New York, and we've run into a lot of resistance. And judges should not be making decisions about whether the person should get an accommodation or not. It's supposed to be administrative. But again, it's become the secretive policy that somebody somewhere in that Office of Court Administration created this new policy. We don't know who did it. It's unlawful. It would take a federal challenge. It would take money to bring it. And I've complained to the state legislators, but we need some sort of organizing principle here. I think there's enough brain power in this audience, and I think something should come out of this conference and get some real momentum going.
Excuse me, there's one thing I want to make very clear, and I'm even going to stand up to do it. Judges are not immune. Judges are not immune of anything. And judges can be sued. I sued 43 federal judges. Of course, there was a lot of backlash on it. But we have Donald Trump who sued judges in Maryland. And that shows if the Department of Justice can sue several federal judges and they have to go out and get their own lawyers, then that means any judge across the nation can be sued. Lawyers do not like to sue judges, nothing personal, because you go up in front of them and you will be retaliated against. You will lose your license for that. But as pro se litigants, ADA advocates, we can do that and we have to do it. I'm the ex-wife of the son of a judge. That's how I got involved in all of this. I was the target. I didn't have the power and the money. So I know it from the inside out. So don't let anyone tell you judges cannot be sued. They can be sued for anything. And we have to go after our risk management and our insurance that we're paying out of our taxes for the insurance that's supposed to give us these rights.
You left out the denouement, the suit, which was crazy. It got dismissed immediately.
It got dismissed, but it made it a point. The point is the smoke and mirrors of that we cannot sue judges. We can sue judges.
Well, yeah, you can sue anybody. Technically, you can get thrown out of court, and it's a waste of time, in my judgment. If you want to change the law, and serve the community, and I think you were correct in pointing out, not that you can't sue in the sense of getting an injunction, but you can't get damages, which is the deterrent effect.
What about Monell liability?
Unless you've changed the law from what it is. I've been involved in that kind of litigation. I don't think we should encourage frivolous litigation like the Trump people did, and which doomed to failure. You can get it changed legislatively. I don't think the Constitution requires that. Anyway, that's just facts as they are.
Okay, let's take a question from here. The gentleman in the back.
Yes, my name is Tim Sherrill. This is my partner, Jody Kalfer. Her 2 young boys was taken 15 months ago, and we've been fighting to get them back. Everything that we proved that the CPS and guardian ad litem and all that lie, they retaliate. They've already tried to isolate me from her because we're not married, we don't live in the same home. She works in the surgery room at Cleveland Clinic. I'm an owner-operator truck driver. She got off work yesterday. We're from Cleveland, Ohio. We drove all the way up here in hopes that someone on the panel or someone in this room would be able to exchange emails to try to help us get our 2 boys back. I say our boys, they're her boys, but they look up to me. I haven't been able to see them for several years because CPS has isolated me from them, from the boys. So if there's anyone in this room or on the panel that could guide us or help us, everybody that we reach out to, as soon as you say CPS or family courts, they agree, but nobody wants to help us. We're almost $15,000 in attorney fees, and they just keep taking and taking. And like I said, the more we jump through the hoops, the more they keep moving the hoops on us. So if there's anybody in the room or on the panel that can exchange emails and help us, guide us to get our boys back, we would greatly appreciate it.
One thing I didn't touch on is that the scientific fraud has tentacles. So what you see that is fabricated there is gospel for CPS, GAL, police. In Connecticut, they look at that diagnosis and they will qualify the mother or father as mentally ill. So there's never a shift in the narrative to show how powerful that initial fraud is. If you look at the beginning of the cases, this stuff does not happen accidentally. So that is just repeatedly weaponized against the loving parent from escaping.
I would also mention that the Institute of Forensic Science formed its new website, Forensic Science Institute, that takes consultation requests.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'll exchange numbers with you.
The one thing I'd flag, I think, in the future is AI. That I have no doubt it's a matter of time where AI will decide what the parents, what the parents are qualified. It'll go in the machine and garbage in, garbage out, and won't even have a human being anymore. They're already trying to do that with regard to bail decisions in some of the criminal cases. But that's something that we need to safeguard against. It'll just be robots, making these decisions. It'll be more than just family court. It'll decide who pulls the trigger to launch nuclear war.
Yes, it amplifies all the troubles we're seeing. That hand that's in the back that's been up for a while.
Thank you so much. My name is Holly Walker. I'm a victim of medical kidnapping of the years 2018 to 2020 with my 2 older children. My question is, what is your proposal to fix this? because 250 people came 3 weeks ago yesterday and showed up for a federal initiative that would literally cover every case I've heard today. Justice and Accountability Act of 2025, written and authored by Francesca Amato. She is a national ADA expert, as I am an ADA advocate in training. Thank you. The name of the bill is the Family Justice and Accountability Act 2025. It is a federal bill because this is no longer at a state, a federal act. This is no longer a statewide issue, which is something we are told daily. This is a federal epidemic at this point, and it's not a question of who's right, wrong, or the other, but what do we do to fix it, and now. Thank you.
You know, the federal, the Congress people and senators can hold field hearings on a lot of the problems that are going on. And I bet if there was a collective effort in here to lobby for that type of exposure, and it was done en masse, like in 10 different states, field hearings on the cases that are, where whoever wants to expose what happened will come forward, then I think that there can be some real traction. Right now, I think the problem is that people are asking, where's the traction? There can be a few media stories that come out and then they die, and then it's the same old entrenched interests. So I think what everybody's frustrated with it, myself, I've been doing this for 30 years, where's the traction? And I'm hoping that if people decide, like, let's lobby and get some action at the federal level and start there. I mean, what else I think that's a good start.
Let me just, for the background of the audience, U.S. Supreme Court held the Americans with Disability Act does apply correctly, in the state court. At least with regard to injunctive relief, I have a case like that. But if we want a true reality check, and this is unfortunate, especially after Citizens United, you know how those members decide what kind of field hearings to go. They look at who's given so much money. We live in a plutocracy, to be candid about it. You can see on the inaugural platform on January 20th, it's like $6 trillion for 6 individuals. And I know because I'm up there all the time. Get into a member's office, okay, how much money did you donate to my campaign? It's easier now to detect because it's reported on the Federal Election Commission. You know, these political action committees and whatever. It's unfortunate, and that's why, in my view, you're more promising at the state level, because at the federal level, they're all in somebody's pocket, with very, very rare exceptions, maybe Thomas Massie, and he's going to be clobbered by Elon Musk probably in this next primary. And that's just a tactical issue. I don't just play your idea. It's a wonderful idea, but I don't think that's going to happen in our lifetime, unless Citizens United and take the fabulous amount of money out of the political system.
I'd say that 30 years, I guess, when was it, 1987, I was working as a community reporter, and a woman named Amy Newstein talked about how her child was whisked away after abuse allegations were made by, I think, the grandmother. And there were field hearings. The child developed.
1987 was a lot way before Citizens United. You know how much money is in the campaign now compared to 1987? It's like 100 to 1.
I have a website called KarenWinner.com. I have a public service component on the website. People can record their stories. or they can text on the site. And when there's enough data, we can, if there's patterns like you're talking about, let's get numbers together. You can't do it as individuals, it would be broken. You need to do it as a collective, and you need to get numbers.
Can you say what the website is again?
KarenWinner.com.
KarenWinner.com?
Yeah. Yes.
That's what they're doing in the UK. They're doing that in the UK. We should talk about the UK, what's happening in the UK, because they're actually being very productive. Very.
Okay, and a lot of that has to do with transparency. Now let's move on. There was this
Thank you. My name is Nikila Bergenberg. I also the same, just trying to get my face in front of the right person. I started my divorce trial, left my abusive ex-husband in Washington State, outskirts of Seattle. Was a stay-at-home mom. Still to this day, don't even have a speeding ticket on my record, and he got full custody. Long story short, he assaulted is an interracial marriage. He assaulted another Black woman 1 week before our divorce trial. Judge completely ignored it. He was drunk as well and was arrested, went to jail. Evidence completely ignored, and instead they just, projected everything onto me. I have gone through, our divorce trial was 7 days long, and then by the grace of God, he actually got me orders, military orders to Maryland, which allowed me to open up to try to stop the relocation. So I was, blessed to get a second trial, which was 12 days long. My psychologist, he testified in my trial for 3 days. They had him on the stand as if he was it was a criminal trial, because they were attacking my mental health, and they completely ignored the evidence. So my story is a little different, where the psychologist, he's 73 years old. I think he was a gal from the state of Washington for 45 years. They disregarded his information about me. So my ex was granted the full custody and relocated here. I've been doing the long distance for 2.5 years. I just relocated to Maryland full-time 6 weeks ago. So when I saw this, I'm like, wow, I prayed for a miracle just to meet anyone. But between the two of us were $800,000 into me trying to get custody of my daughter. He's the only one with a domestic violence background and an arrest. 2 diagnoses from the state of Washington of alcoholism. Even the military, the tribunal courts found him guilty, and he was charged with a DB4 in Washington State. Again, not even a speeding ticket on my record. I work at Microsoft. I work in clinical trials. I'm an executive assistant supporting very high people. I've been in nuclear, supported a guy who got a contract through NASA for one of the space projects. And it sucks that I have to explain myself, but that's been my whole life. Anything. I don't have a record. My 8-year-old is still with her dad, and he's an alcoholic, and I just want her back. So, safety, anyone who's just willing to just talk.
Yes, we're recognizing that the stories are quite consistent. Did you have a question?
No, it was just getting up here, my voice has been silenced for years, and I also went through an appeal, and that they took 2 years to rule on that, to wait for his, good behavior for his DB4 to sign on his parents' sign.
Okay.
So
the question is, what can she do?
What can anyone? I just want to put my face to be known, because I just need help. I talked to a gentleman earlier, he said this is a new state, and I'm just hoping. I don't have a record. We can pay for attorney, my family, I'm not any of the stereotypical things they said, so I'm desperate for my daughter, that's all. I just want her back and wait for him, as you said.
I would just recommend documenting everything. At the end of the day, your evidence is either going to support your narrative or discredit. So I would tell everyone, document every single thing, show your history, show where the changes took place. I think if we did an analysis of the family structure pre-forensic evaluator and post, it would be remarkably consistent. So any of the third parties that are coming in, just make sure to continue to document.
I have a 29-minute clip from the appeals court. It was recorded. I literally could just show you everything. 7-day trial, 12-day family court trial where it was a relocation,
and an appeal. So I have so much documentation. I have the docket of the 44 egregious mistakes that the court made. Literally not one law that justifies community custody. I can pay someone for their hour or two to watch the 30-minute and give their evaluation, but I'm ready to move forward today or tomorrow. My family's ready to write the check. We want my baby. Like, we're desperate. It's like, I haven't.
So, I think a lot of survivors, kind of in the same boat where they don't have any faith in the family court system anymore. And I know that with young survivors, really we've just turned to social media, sharing our story in any way that we can and getting supporters wherever we can. I know that, a lot of people's experiences in the family courts, especially children's, they've never been heard, and really that has been such a game changer for us. I know that family courts don't like this kind of transparency, especially when you're taking it into your own hands. So, there's been a lot of families that I've worked with where they're just at the end of their rope. There's nothing more that they can do in the legal system, and so they turn to sharing their story, with the public, which can be, it depends on your case and everything like that. It can be somewhat detrimental depending on the judge, but sometimes it's a risk that people feel like they need to take, and I know that a lot of young survivors have done that themselves as well.
I think I think people have become desensitized because of the volume of cases. They don't think, it's really public perception. If the public knew what was going on, there would be outrage everywhere. So the public is skeptical when they see a judge endorse these conclusions. So I think we have to make this indefensible publicly. So, and tell a digestible story. Everyone's got a story that, I've lived it. It's just, there's so many details. So my recommendation is tell a digestible story that anyone can understand and back it up with evidence.
Okay, I'm afraid we're out of time. There'll be more time for discussion after the second panel. There will be a 10-minute break, and then we return at 3 o'clock for the second panel.
We're from Ohio as well.
Leading this national movement has been Arizona, and then following it, Idaho, and then multiple other states have this plan. So we discussed in the first panel just how important sunlight is, because if anything is going to happen, as Attorney Fine stated, any system can be co-opted if we have malevolent intent. But we can also transform these systems if we can raise public awareness and bring the standards to family courts that are so vitally needed. So I'd first like to present to you Honorary Senator Marge Finchem of Arizona, co-chair of the Joint Legislative Ad Hoc Committee on Family Court Orders.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Lee. I'm glad that I get to speak first after the break because now everybody's got a little energy because about 15 minutes ago, all I heard was despair and frustration. And that should break the heart of every legislator that sits in legislatures across the United States. So I've got a couple things, and I know I probably have a time limit. There is a rule though, never trust a politician with a microphone. Never ends well. But I don't call myself a politician. I'm an employee of the people. And I think that that's probably where myself and JD, probably, in fact, most of the people in this panel, we differ from our colleagues because we recognize we work for you. We don't work for the court, they didn't elect us, and we sure as hell don't work for a governor. We work for the people. That's the construct of our government. And the court seems to have forgotten that. So we're here to remind them. So there's a couple of high-level things that I'm going to speak to, given that I have to kind of move along. But I'm going to tell you what we're doing in Arizona. One, and I'm going to try to touch on each, I'll come back and revisit each one of these. The pressure cooker strategy. How many of you know what a pressure cooker is? Show of hands. No, I mean really, a pressure cooker. Okay, half the room. Y'all need to get back into canning. Okay. And then legislation is only as good as the courts. Only as good as the judges who have to carry it out. And then family court orders that go on forever, the temporary order that goes on for 9 years. And then I want to talk a little bit, I'll probably wrap this up with racketeering. I heard the elements of the crime of racketeering with the last panel, but I didn't hear anybody discuss it, so we'll get into that. But let me give you just a really brief hearing, and I'm glad that my good colleague from Idaho, Senator Tammy Nichols, is on this panel with me. Arizona stood up back in April of last year, a joint legislative ad hoc committee, meaning it's not a regularly sitting committee, but the President of the Senate, when I went to him and said, hey, we're sitting on plutonium here. We need to do something on behalf of thousands of parents in the United States in the little state of Arizona. And our population isn't nearly what some of these states are. We're kind of tiny compared to the rest of the country. While the Biden administration says we only have 6.5 million, it's probably closer to 8, that whole census thing. Yeah. But we have had 4 hearings, over 40 hours of testimony, and stories that would absolutely break your heart. Now, I know that the people in this room, those stories came from some of you. So we are making progress. I don't want to brag about things, but we have had one judge recuse herself from all of her cases. We don't know exactly what's behind that, but I would say it's probably the pressure cooker strategy, which is low heat in a confined space and lots of time. Then you turn up the heat until you have the right pressure. Then you see results. So think about that for a moment. And here is some of what we took away from, and I would be remiss if I did not call out our policy advisor, Elena Kovlowski, from the Senate. If you would like to get a copy of the Senate Ad Hoc Committee's report, please just, I'll give you my contact information when you're at the end of this. Be happy to furnish it to you because it appears to be a template of just about everything that we've heard here today. But there's some common themes that went out of this. First of all, oversight gaps for court-ordered psychologists and allied professionals. All right, so besides being the co-chair of the Joint Legislative Ad Hoc Committee on Family Court Orders, I'm also the chairman of the Joint Legislative Audit Committee. Does the word audit send kind of a chill down the back of your spine? Well, it does when you offer to do an audit of the Office of the Court Administrator. Huh. Could you show me your criteria for employing psychologists and allied psychiatric care professionals? Why is it that they need to have quasi-judicial immunity? Well, we know why, because they don't operate within a recognized standard of practice. In other words, the insurance company wouldn't pay them because they're so far to the fringe that there is no proof that what they're advocating works. That's why the insurance company's not going to pay for it. That's why they need to have quasi-judicial immunity. So, next on the hit parade, there's very little for the child's voice. Voice of the minor. Have we kind of forgotten this is supposed to be about the best interest of the child? Not the best interest of the attorney or the best interest of the psychologist or anybody who is engaged in billable hours. So the court appears to have become captured by what I'm going to call the Family Court Orders Industrial Complex. Thank you, President Eisenhower. Because it is a weaponization of the court against families, against parents. We heard testimony that hundreds of thousands, in a couple of cases, millions of dollars have been spent by parents to maintain some level of activity with their children. A temporary order that goes on 9 years. That sounds like an attorney who is inflaming the passions of one of the litigants to the point of vexatious litigation. It also sounds like a psychologist who really likes the idea that he's got a goose that laid the golden egg. And yes, that is a phrase that was used between two psychologists when the law in Arizona was passed. And unfortunately, our governor, social worker who calls herself Governor Hobbs, vetoed a bill that actually would have reversed this. And that would have been to require the approval of both parents going into court-ordered behavioral intervention, COBE. By the way, COBE is probably the biggest threat to family integrity that has ever come along. And the guys that came up with this, a guy by the name of Cohen, former judge, a guy by the name of Weinstock, a so-called, I'm going to call him a pseudo-psychologist, because they're so far out on the fringe, but they're trying to sell this as a licensed product to the states to use. Once again, we now have a financial incentive that has crept into the court system for all the participants for getting the poll star of the best interest of the child. We're going to force you to have a relationship with a guy who sodomized you. Wow, that's a winner of an argument to a child. The guy who raped your mom. Well, it's just domestic assault. It's okay. It'll all be good. No, it's not all good. So we've also identified reunification programs, which quite frankly are kidnapping. Did you know that a judge does not have authority to remove a child from the county of their jurisdiction? Think about that one for a minute. You've got a Maricopa County judge. Fortunately, this can't happen in Arizona anymore, but you've got a Maricopa County judge that sends a child to Texas, not only out of the county, but across state lines, against the child's will. That's an important factor. That's called kidnapping. Literally, a kid taken out of the state to another state. We've got fragmented accountability and quasi-judicial immunity, which, by the way, I intend to blow up in the next legislative session in Arizona. It's not needed. Now, the people who are protected by it, of course, would say that it is. I'm especially interested in the commentary that happened in the last few minutes of the last panel, because it's extremely important. Under Section 1983, Federal Code, you cannot interfere with somebody's civil rights under the color of authority. Judge. You can't engage in kidnapping. You can't engage in the severance of parental rights without a jury trial. That'll be another thing that we're going to introduce. Then, of course, cost, access, and due process. These are straining families to the point where the house that the child should be reared in is going up for foreclosure sale. Wow, Judge, you kind of blew it on that one. All because they need to pay for what? The vexatious litigation and the psychologist who wants to have this thing go on and on and on and on. Then we have training and competency. In Arizona, your state may be different, but in Arizona, it is usually a 2-year assignment of a new judge, and the new guy always gets sent to family court. because nobody wants to do that duty. So they don't want to be there. They probably have not had any training whatsoever in PTSD, domestic assault, sexual assault, deviant behavior, although some of them might actually be deviants. Then, of course, we've got the sexual predators, who, by the way, hide behind their psychologist degree, sending children to their groomer parent. All of this leads me to believe that we have a racketeering case that is ripe for a receptive U.S. attorney. So there are some legislative options that I want to go through, and then I promise I'll wrap it up. I'm getting close on time. I'm trying to be respectful of our host. So there's some structural options that we can pursue, some elements to codify. One of the things that is very interesting in Arizona law, and I forget which title it is, I want to say Title 26, but I don't think that's right. Section 403, in fact, if you go to Grok is your friend here, Arizona law, Section 403, is the schedule of concerns that a court is supposed to take into consideration for awarding parental custody. There's 12 of them. And it kind of looks like somebody took a handful of darts and threw them at a board all at the same time. The list in order of priority makes absolutely no sense. Number 6 on the hit parade, I think, is domestic assault. Number 8 might be sexual assault. Okay, why wouldn't those be number 1 and number 2? Okay. So one of the things that we are going to pursue is the reordering of those. And in Arizona, there's a court case, I believe referred to as Gutierrez, where the appellate court came out and said, well, you don't have to abide by that because it's just a temporary order. That might go on for 9 years, but it's just a temporary order, so you don't have to do that. No, we're going to codify, who knows if the social worker acting as governor signs the bill, but we're going to codify that, yes, indeed, temporary orders have to consider the top 4 items. And number 5 on that list is going to be voice of the minor. At 14 years of age, most adolescents know that the parent who cares for them most is the place they want to be. Right now, the courts don't even listen to what the minor has to say. We want to change that. We want to make sure that kids have a voice in where they're going to go, because here's my experience in speaking with some of the adolescents who did not testify for fear of retribution by the court, but talking to some of the aged out minors, now adults. The only thing that Kobe taught me to do is live my life within the system until I could age out. In other words, fake it till you can't take it. Taught them how to game the system. That's the only thing that it has done. It has not reunified, well, not reunified, but sure as held and re-energized a relationship that has to happen organically. You cannot force an individual to be with their abuser and expect that that relationship will be rectified without the abuser changing their ways. So I think I've covered just about everything that I have time for, but I will be here for as long as Dr. Lee will let me talk. Thank you very much.
Next woman, Honorary Representative Rachel Petchel. She couldn't be here today, but she has kindly sent a recording. You may have noticed also Attorney Richard Ducote is missing because of the travel disruptions. I'm going to get this person's name written down. not quite to the recording, but Representative Rachel Keschel has. So we'll play the recording.
Hi everyone, this is Arizona State House Representative Rachel Keschel. I am so sorry that I can't be with you at this very important conference. I promised my family when I went into this crazy world of politics that I would always put them first, and I have a couple of kid commitments that I needed to be in Arizona for. I know you, of all people, understand that because you fight so fiercely for your families and your children. What we started in Arizona has become a tidal wave across this nation of people saying enough is enough in our family courts. Remember, the government belongs to we the people, and the family courts are not serving the people well. So legislators just like me and so many of the other wonderful legislators at the conference, like Senator Mark Fincham, Senator Tammy Nichols, and others, are working diligently to reform the courts and make sure that they serve the people better. We are working across state lines with people in Idaho, California, the Midwest, Florida, and nationwide to make sure that the egregious things occurring in our family courts will not be allowed to happen anymore. But I just want to encourage you, keep moving forward, keep fighting, be relentless, be vocal, be courageous, be bold, don't be afraid. Know that you have legislators and advocates across this nation fighting for you. And as long as God has me in this seat in Arizona, I promise each and every one of you to continue to fight to reform the family courts. This cannot stand anymore. The judges and the court-appointed officials know that we are watching them now, and that these things cannot continue to go on and hurt the families in our states. I wish I could be there with you, but make sure you take good notes. Make sure you listen to all of these wonderful speakers and glean wisdom from them, especially Dr. Bandy Lee, and bring those notes back to your legislators and continue to fight alongside us as we work so diligently on reforming our family courts. Thank you all. I love you very much. Have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon.
Thanks to Representative Rachel Keschel. Next is Honorary Senator Tammy Nichols of Idaho, who is co-chair of Child Custody and Domestic Relations Task Force, the state that has followed Arizona in galvanizing the national court system.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lee. Appreciate you having us here today. And thank you for everyone that has come out on this issue. We know that it is just beyond what we could even fathom as far as the number of people that this is impacting all over the nation. So again, my name is Tammy Nichols, and I'm a senator in Idaho in District 10, and I serve as the co-chair of the Idaho Child Custody and Domestic Relations Task Force. This year, our task force has been charged with reviewing the systematic issues identified during the hearings that we've held across the state and determining where Idaho's family court system may be failing to meet constitutional, statutory, and ethical standards. We've had 5 meetings throughout our state with hours and hours of public testimony. Usually between 40 to 60 people are here to give testimony, and Dr. Levy, she came, Senator Fincham has been there, and Veronica down at the end. You'll hear from her later, but we've had some amazing testimony, all very sad and very emotional. And then we just held yesterday our first public task force discussion meeting where our task force could discuss together all the information that we've heard and what is our path forward on this. So our mission has been to reach consensus on legislative priorities that will ensure Idaho's judiciary protects due process, parental rights, and child safety as required by law. We recognize that parental rights are fundamental liberties, protected not only by the Idaho Constitution, but also by our 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. The U.S. Supreme Court has affirmed these rights time and time again, and Idaho's own courts have called them sacred and not to be lightly interfered with. These are not abstract ideas, they are the very framework of justice in all of our states. And when the system entrusted to uphold them fails, it shakes public confidence in the entire judiciary and leaves real families suffering the consequences. Family and domestic relation laws govern the most personal areas of life, yet unlike other areas of law, it lacks a uniform system of oversight and accountability. Procedures can vary dramatically from county to county and state by state. Two families facing nearly identical situations may receive entirely different outcomes depending solely on the geographic or judicial discretion. There are many good judges that are out there, attorneys and professionals working within the system. These individuals do care deeply about the children and families and are trying their best within the constraints they face, because I'm working with several of them and they're trying to help us to be able to make changes in our state. However, as the saying goes, one bad apple can spoil the bunch. Even one professional acting outside proper boundaries can erode trust across the system. Even good people struggle to work effectively in a system that isn't transparent, consistent, or clearly guided. When that happens, the system stops working correctly and poor practices begin to take hold. In many cases, we are setting families up for failure and children up for a lifetime of trauma and emotional instability. The problem isn't necessarily the people, however, it's the structure itself. When there is little accountability and an entire process begins to lose its balance and fairness. Our task force has seen patterns of lack of enforcement, lack of transparency, lack of consequences, and a high cost of participation, all of which have allowed inconsistent and sometimes harmful practices to continue unchecked. Without meaningful oversight, there are no guardrails, and families ultimately pay the price. In Idaho, approximately 60% of individuals in family court represent themselves, not because they choose to, but because they cannot afford an attorney. Many are also ordered to pay for mental health evaluations, custody evaluations, supervised evaluations and visitations, parenting classes, transcripts, and counseling. These may serve valuable purpose, but together they create costs that can quickly spiral into thousands and thousands of dollars. We have heard from parents who have had to choose between paying rent and complying with court-ordered services. For many families, justice isn't just delayed, it's out of reach altogether. When one parent can afford representation and the other cannot, the courtroom becomes unbalanced. That reality undermines both due process and equal protection under the law, two principles that every court, every judge, and every public servant have sworn to uphold. And for those representing themselves, the maze of rulings, filings, and deadlines can be overwhelming. They're expected to navigate a process that even seasoned attorneys find complex. The result is that too many Idahoans have been walking away from the system feeling powerless and unheard, and I'm sure many of you can relate to that. Our task force has also found that the system itself is fragmented. Families are bounced between agencies, evaluators, and courts, each with its own rules, forms, and timelines. There are lengthy delays in hearings, inconsistent enforcement of orders, and confusion when multiple jurisdictions or protective orders overlaps. Families often describe the process as a maze with no exit, and they are right. It demands organization, patience, and resources from people who are already emotionally and financially exhausted. When parents are fighting simply to maintain contact with their children, or grandparents are trying to provide stability, this dysfunction is more than frustrating, it is deeply harmful. Justice delayed, especially in family court, is more than an inconvenience. It can become a childhood lost. Time is not something that we can return to a child or a parent once it's gone. The problems we've identified in Idaho are not isolated. Arizona helped us to get started, and now other states have contacted our task force to share that they are facing the same challenges: lack of oversight, high cost, and declining public trust in the family law system. That tells us that this is not just a state issue, it is a national concern. Idaho is taking a leadership role by shining light on these problems and working towards solutions that both protect parents and children. By addressing this openly and courageously, states like Idaho can become a model for reform, showing that fairness, accountability, and compassion can coexist in our courts. Our task force is developing legislation for upcoming sessions designed to restore balance, fairness, and trust in Idaho's family law system. And you can do the same thing in your states. Among our top priorities are oversight, which establishing a statewide review body or ombudsman to ensure accountability and provide a clear avenue for complaints. Affordability, reducing or capping costs for court-ordered services and offering more tools and legal resources for self-representing litigants, utilizing mediation to help save on costs and reducing caseloads in court. Consistency and enforcement, creating uniform statewide standards so outcomes don't depend on which county or judge hears the case, and reforming temporary orders by setting a mandatory maximum time frame to prevent prolonged uncertainty, making sure orders are enforced and consequences occur when they are not followed. Transparency and accountability, expanding data collection and public reporting so we can identify breakdowns, bad actors, and trends before they become crises. Education, strengthening training for judges, attorneys, and guardians ad litem on trauma, family dynamics, domestic violence, and the long-term impacts of custody decisions. These are just some of the issues that we're looking at for legislation for next session. But these efforts are not about undermining the courts. They are about supporting them, providing the clarity, consistency, and accountability necessary for the system to work as it was intended. Behind every case file is a real family, a parent desperate to see their children, a grandparent trying to hold things together, a child waiting for stability and peace. We've spoken with families who have spent years, even decades, entangled in the system. They've depleted savings, they've lost their jobs, and in many cases, they've lost hope. Children have been uprooted repeatedly and left carrying emotional scars that last well into adulthood. When the process itself becomes the trauma, something is deeply wrong in that system. And at the heart of this work is trust. Trust that our laws will be applied fairly, that due process will be honored, parental rights upheld, and that children will be protected. We cannot continue to ask families to navigate a process that even legal professionals find confusing and chaotic. Family courts should not be a place where justice is available only to those that can afford it or manipulate it best. It must be a place where every parent and every child is treated fairly under the law. Parental rights, due process, and child safety are not partisan issues. They are fundamental liberties, and it is our duty as legislators to ensure our laws and courts reflect those values. Families deserve better. And through this task force and others that can be done in your states, we are determined to make sure that they get it. This will take all of us. There is no sitting this out. Each of you have a voice, and now you're being called to use it. Thank you for your time and commitment to this critical issue, and please contact me if you have any questions or if we can help get this started in your state. We do hear you, we do understand, we want to make a difference, and it's going to take all of us to be able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Nichols. Next is Honorary Senator Suzanne Weber, a former mayor and an advocate and actively involved in legislative initiatives for family welfare and family court reform.
It's really amazing to be here, to be with you all, to hear your stories. Before I was a legislator, before I was a mayor, I spent 30 years in the classroom. I saw countless numbers of children being impacted by our courts. I never thought I had the opportunity to make a difference until I became a legislator. Testifying about custody, testifying about abuse is one thing. being able to stand up and make a difference is something else. It's something we all need to embrace.
I can't hear you.
When I started hearing from constituents about issues that they were involved in, it would be grandparents. Grandparents who had the judge say, well, you look like you've got money. This should be easy. We have time. When I would hear that same judge say about giving custody of a 1-month-old breastfed baby to the father for 2 weeks, no problem. When I would hear Children Protective Services say, I don't work on weekends, so I'm sorry I can't help you. We have major problems that we need to address. Our family courts should be the most humane and just part of our judicial system. They handle the heart of our nation, our parents and our children, at a time when they are the most vulnerable. And yet too often that system confuses its mission, treating loving parents and grandparents like combatants, and reducing our children to files. The problem is that our family court system was never designed to serve American families. It evolved without a framework grounded in fairness, accountability, or constitutional rights. Fit parents have a God-given right to raise their children with love and guidance. Likewise, children have a right to be protected and nurtured by fit parents. They need to be safe from harm and unnecessary state intrusion. And yet, many courts have dismissed these rights. Often, family courts lack due process, equal protection. They allow discrimination between fit parents and ignoring the presumption of innocence. Life-altering decisions are made in secret, off the record, by people the Constitution never authorized. Families walk in seeking fairness, and they leave with trauma, debt, shattered trust, and nowhere to turn. We must confront an uncomfortable truth. Family court is often fueled by profit. How many people have I heard say, we have no more. Our home is going to be gone. I'm going to have to work until I die in order to be able to afford what I'm living in. How can we do this to society? Each continuance, evaluation, or so-called intervention means new fees. The system rewards delay and dispute rather than resolution. Peace costs the system money, and conflict sustains it. Parents who should be saving for their children's future deplete their savings to survive years of litigation. Grandparents, our caretakers of last resort, spend their retirement fighting simply to protect their grandchildren. Family law today is not a system of justice. It operates like a casino. Irrational outcomes, arbitrary rulings, and a structure where the house always wins. Families lose everything. When justice depends on families' ability to pay, it ceases to be justice at all. After witnessing the harm in the system, I was able to work with Senator Solman on a bipartisan bill. After meeting with DAs, judges, people who should have been able to give us an answer on how we were going to be able to meet the challenges that we were meeting in the legal system. We finally were able to come up with a bill that we managed to pass, Senate Bill 710, in the legislature in the last long session, which ensures that Oregon judges receive continuing education on domestic and sexual violence so that they can recognize trauma and respond with compassion. This is just the tip of what we need to do. We need to be looking at the entire system. We need to be making the entire system relevant to our children and to our futures. I know I have a limited amount of time here. I want you all to look at something. I'm not going to be able to go into it right now, but it's the Troxel 2 brief. Dr. Dan Sturdivant. He built upon the U.S. Supreme Court case of Troxel versus Grenville in 2000.
You spell that, please?
Troxel, Troxel. I think you should look it up because I feel that it is a clear constitutional nonpartisan blueprint for reform. And I think we need to be looking especially at that reform. Because what we need is constitutional oversight. Family courts must respect due process and equal protection. We have to be looking at fiscal responsibility. Reform will reduce costs for taxpayers by shortening cases and limiting unnecessary interventions. We need to look at number 3, public safety. By reducing conflict and incentivizing collaboration, we need to promote child safety and family stability. And number 4, we need to work at preservation of family bonds, protecting the sacred bond between the fit parent and their children, and supporting kinship and adoptive care when needed. Arizona, you need to be commended. Idaho, you also need to be commended. The wave of states that are working to make sure that this is going to be a reality, don't stop. In Oregon right now, we are working with advocates, professionals, and families to form a family court reform task force. We need to examine our statutes, our agencies, and the conflicts of interest that perpetuate continued harm. And we are going to continue to recommend additional legislation that will be grounded in data, accountability, and constitutional law. This is not a partisan issue. It is a human rights issue. And Congress must ensure that federal funding never incentivizes conflict or unnecessary child removals. Civil rights protections must apply equally in every courtroom. If justice is blind, then she must also be brave. It takes courage to reform a system that feeds on silence, but we owe that courage to every parent, grandparent, and child who has suffered behind closed doors. This is a civil rights moment for millions of families. We must ensure that our justice system serves families, not money, not bureaucracy, not self-interest. Because when we serve our families first, we serve the future of America. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Weber from Oregon. I'm not sure I mentioned the geographic location she's from. Next is Honorary Representative J.D. Bernardi from New Hampshire. He is a member of the House Science, Technology, and Energy Committee, as well as a co-founder of New Hampshire Valley Justice.
Dr. Lee, and good afternoon. As was mentioned, I'm a member of the Science, Tech, and Energy Committee, but it was constituent service that brought me to this issue. New Hampshire is a little unique from a lot of the other states, so I'll start off with our problem. It's my belief that the New Hampshire Circuit Court family division failures stem from a systemic due process violations inherent in the court's procedures, rules, and enabling statutes since 2005. Now, most of the cases have not been adjudicated by true judges in New Hampshire, meaning constitutional officers. The presiding officer has routinely been a marital master, a referee, or a retired judge who is no longer eligible to serve as a constitutional officer. So now they are all 3-year contractors. Contract judges are not subject to the New Hampshire Code of Judicial Conduct, so there is no official mechanism to address accountability or judicial malfeasance. In hearings, litigants and witnesses are typically not sworn in. There's no pursuit of perjury. So the Family Division of New Hampshire is publicly known as the Liars Court. Contract orders are required to be countersigned by a constitutional judge to certify that the correct legal standard has been applied. The supervisory judge of the Family Division testified regarding proposed legislation that it's virtually impossible for a real judge to spend the time needed to go through the file. And further, to get a clear understanding of the case without sitting in the courtroom, seeing the witnesses, judging their credibility, and listening to all the facts. His bill to repeal that judicial co-signature requirement was not adopted, so all the inadequacies and deficiencies of the process still remain. Now, one would expect the rules of the Circuit Court Family Division should be consistent with all the other circuit courts in New Hampshire. However, Rule 1.2 says, the Family Division may waive the application of any rule except where prohibited by law. Other than the New Hampshire Constitution or the U.S. Constitution, there are no prohibitions. Rule 2.2 states that New Hampshire rules of evidence do not apply. In case after case, litigants claim their ability to present evidence or gain discovery has been seriously or severely hampered because Rule 1.25 states the court at its discretion may limit or expand the scope of discovery in any case as justice requires. These rules apply whether the case is being heard by a constitutional or contract judge. So what are the consequences? Well, there are some contract judges that actually do a reasonable job, despite all the flaws in the system. Yet, for way too many abuses and violations remain, as you've heard here all day, very similar. The most common pattern, with some of the worst consequences, is protracting the cases interminably until the younger children reach the age of 18. Which keeps the cash flow going for all the parties involved. This is done by giving primary custody to the least appropriate involved parent, too many times an abuser or totally disengaged or disinterested parent. The consequences? Abuse, kidnapping, bankruptcy, loss of homes, loss of possessions, children failing to thrive, PTSD-like symptoms, and aggrieved parents who are left with nothing but desperate measures to even see their children. These horrendous decisions are often based on the contracts judge's assessment that reunification therapy with an abuser is an appropriate order, or supposed alienation of affections requires it. Now, case protraction is a nationwide problem, and it's propped up by a federal law, Title 4D of the Social Security Act. Constitutional judges can't be paid with Title IV-D funds, but all the contract judges and all the rest of the family division staff can. States have to certify that at least 20% of all their cases are protracted or complex in order to obtain federal funding. The Act essentially incentivizes the removal of one parent from the scene. Title IV-D was meant to address real parental abandonment. It is totally inappropriate for this act to incentivize the creation of a single parent and then restrict children's time with actual fit parents and penalize the same parents for not being involved. Finally, in New Hampshire, evidence was recently offered in a federal district court hearing that New Hampshire fails in family and relative reunification at a rate twice that of the national average and 3 times the rate for children with disabilities. So after, in my 3rd term, I've proposed this solution, which is to abolish the family division. The idea is to return jurisdiction back to the Superior Court, where it was in 2005. Superior Court offers the visibility into the system, and it also offers the opportunity for trial by jury. It operates with full due process for all the cases, and my proposal is that any case of child abuse, neglect, or domestic violence would be immediately moved to that court. My bill also created a new option for divorce mediation using the standards of the Academy of Professional Family Mediators. It's a well-recognized group that deals with just this focus. So the plan ensures due process rights for difficult cases, informed consent when choosing mediation, an opportunity to access the Superior Court if mediation is not working, and importantly, eliminates due process problems that plague the current family court system, reestablishing constitutional rights for our citizens to a trial in equity. Bottom line, the current family court system is unconstitutional and irredeemably broken. It can't be fixed with Band-Aids. Court rules institutionalize the absence of due process and fundamental rights. The family court is causing ongoing irreparable harm to families and children, and the proposed repair establishes due process and quality mediation alternative, and in the end is also likely to reduce costs to the state. So with all this, I thank you for the opportunity to present today and help to fight.
Thank you, Representative Bernardi. Next is Ms. Veronica Bays, who is the Chief Operating Officer of a national health care platform, a doctoral student, a veteran, and a mother. Her first-hand experiences have fueled her mission to reform family courts.
First off, I want to go a little off script here. I see Jessica Saxton in the audience. I just want to say that you are one of my heroes. Good afternoon. My name is Veronica Baez, as some of you may know, and I stand before you first and foremost as a mother. I'm an Army veteran and Chief Operating Officer of a nationwide technology company, but most importantly today, I stand before you as a citizen who has watched our family courts betray the very families and my own children who they were built to protect. I want to begin by thanking every legislator in this country who has chosen to stand up for families and for truth. Those who are brave enough to say that justice should not depend on your bank account, your race, your gender, or your zip code. In particular, I want to thank my home state of Idaho and our dear friends in Arizona, where lawmakers have had the courage to hold hearings, confront uncomfortable truths, and put children, not institutions, at the center of the conversation. Idaho and Arizona have proven that bipartisan courage and collaboration are still possible in America. Across this nation, from Boise to Boston, from Dallas to DC, we are witnessing what I call the weaponization of expertise. Court-appointed professionals, psychologists, guardian ad litems, parenting coordinators, they were meant to protect families. But too often, they've become paid gatekeepers of power, funded by the very people they're supposed to serve. When a mother reports abuse, she is labeled as alienating. When a father seeks fairness, he is called aggressive. Expertise becomes a sword of slaughter instead of a shield, and justice becomes something you have to buy to survive. This isn't child protection, it's profit cloaked as professionalism. And when that broken structure is enforced by unaccountable judges, the result is the weaponization of the bench itself. Too many family court judges, including Judge Dan Walker in my very state, silence parents, seal cases, and punish speech under the guise of protection. They use their robes to become activists on the bench, to rewrite truth, and their power to erase accountability. In those moments, the courtroom becomes a battlefield, not of law, but of bloodshed and survival. The Constitution promises us due process, yet in family court, it is optional. Evidence becomes irrelevant, and the truth becomes dangerous. This isn't the rule of law, it's the rule of fear. And make no mistake, this system is draining our nation. Every year, over $100 billion is spent on family courts and child welfare agencies, yet the return on investment is negative. A loss of $10 to $18 for every $1 spent. This past week in Boston, I had the privilege of meeting with scholars from Harvard Law, and MIT. Our discussion was family courts and the Madisonian Project, written by a dear colleague, Dr. Studerbach, PhD. Professionals who previously may have never been alerted to the constitutional atrocities occurring in family court are examining this now under the framework of Troxel II. This analysis has now been submitted to 10 law reviews nationwide, bringing constitutional law and empirical economics together to show that what families have lived for decades, that the lower courts are not just mismanaging justice, they are committing crimes and they are violating civil rights. The data shows that for every one child truly protected, about 25 are wrongfully cut off from a fit parent, and nearly 2 abused children remain unprotected. In economic terms, it's a social loss exceeding $1 trillion a year. In moral terms, it's a national emergency. When conflict becomes a business model, justice is no longer the goal, profit is. And every dollar stolen from every parent in this room and every working parent is a dollar stolen from our children's future. The constitutional law powers that be, from Congress to our appellate courts, must take note. The evidence is no longer anecdotal, it is empirical, audited, and undisputable. History will look back in this era and call family court one of the greatest civil rights injustices of our time. Because what is happening behind those sealed doors is not family law. It is systemic deprivation of liberty. Parents are stripped of their children without due process. Children are stripped of their voices and of their innocence without consent. And truth is stripped of its meaning altogether. This is not a women's issue. This is not a men's issue. It is a human rights issue. So today, I call on Congress, every state legislator, and every citizen to act. Demand transparency, demand oversight, demand that the rights of parents and children be protected with the same passion we once reserved for voting rights and free speech. The foundation of a free nation is the family. And if the state can dismantle a family without accountability, then no right in this nation is safe. I want to close with this. To my children, Alexander, Michelangelo, Faithlin, Scarlett, Oliver, Charles, and Theodore, you are my reason for standing here today. Everything I do is to ensure that their pain was not in vain, and that their children, my grandchildren, never know the agony or injustice we have lived through in these courts. I want them to inherit a nation where truth is not punished, where families are not divided for profit, and where the law protects, not destroys. I thank God that these truths are finally coming to light, and that He continues to give us the strength, wisdom, and fortitude to stand in this fight. To our lawmakers, thank you for your courage. To every parent, you are not alone. This is unforever. Let this be the generation that restored justice to the family, truth to the courtroom, and in God we trust. Thank you.
Please join me again in an applause of appreciation to all our members. Okay, I think we can jump right into the question and answer session, given how many answers. Okay, there's.
How do we get more senators like all of you?
Question, that's a softball question, run. No, I'm serious. Between school boards, town councils, county commissioners, House of Representatives, and Senate, every person in this room has the opportunity to run for office and make change. Every single butt in a seat here. And if you're not the guy or the gal, you know the guy or the gal and support it. That's how.
I want to speak to that too, Mark. As a civilian who had never voted before all of this, you just have to not stop. And I hear a lot of desperation. You have to go out there, make the connections, don't stop. Look at people that you know in the community. You probably already, there's a PTA, start sending emails, get your bubble rolls from the, now I forgot the name of the office. Thank you, the AG's office, get any Secretary of State, thank you, see, we're not political whatsoever. You gotta go out there and you gotta make those connections. I've stood literally on a corner in front of the voting booths with a sign in the middle of November and it was cold. You have to do what it takes because nobody cares as much as you.
I want to second that. Get out there and make a difference. Everyone in this room has that opportunity to be able to run for an office and make a difference. It's nothing to be afraid of. I spent 30 years in a classroom and then I got mad. And you can make that difference and you can start small, just like they said, but do it.
Thank you. Next question.
I'll agree with that. I would start small. I started out as from the zoning board in my town, worked my way up to be the chairman, and from there went on to the state office. But it's something that you can start off with those smaller offices while you're still working. If you've got a career that you can't walk away from. But that gets your name out there, that gets people knowing you, and you knowing how the system works. And once you've got that, and when you're ready to back away from the big salary, At least in New Hampshire, we get paid $100 a year. Then you can run for office. If you don't have to wait for that, then go ahead. But get yourself out there. You guys can do it.
The other thing you need to do is you need to evaluate the people that are running for office. And you need to ask them these hard questions. Where do you stand on this? Who are you going to look out for? Who are you going to be able to protect? Are you going to be able to move forward and make some hard decisions?
Do you understand the Constitution of your state and the country? It's very important.
Yes. That's a very loaded question. Thank you for your patience. Go ahead with your question.
My name is Cora. I am a parent. I came here today from Portland, Oregon, and my question is for Senator Weber. I relate to a lot of the statistics, and I'm a survivor. And I am wondering what is effective in our state to preserve my family, to reestablish the custody that I have that has been blocked by a temporary order. And is there peer support? Is there citizen organizations in our state that can help us to protect my children? Thank you.
I can give you a name and an address and a telephone number when I'm finished here of someone who can definitely connect you with, and Veronica can also, with some resources. But let me tell you, it's just at the ground level right now. I know that there are probably 30 more people that are in your same situation. And as despicable as it is for our families and our children, we need to, in Oregon, continue to, number one, get this task force off the ground. And we need to continue to work and spread the word of how we can work forward. So we'll talk.
Hey, there's a question over here.
Can I just add one
Yes,
really?
please.
Sorry. I just want to say on that. So that emotion that you're feeling right now, that anger and that hurt, you need to embrace that and use it. Use it for positive changes. Get involved. Get involved at the most local level. Every district in your state that has a representative also has a smaller, in my state it's called a precinct committeeman. That is the most local level of government. They are elected positions. Find your precinct committeeman, find your central committee, and get involved at that most local level of government. Let people know who you are. Start your own group. Start your own thing.
I will say that the court-appointed attorney for my child wrote in her declaration, which was mostly, sounding scientific founded, but there was no evidence to sanction me. As a protected parent who has the same judge that signed one of the multiple protection orders that I've had, I have climbed up from despair and living the impact of abuse. And to be sanctioned as a parent while my child, who is a 13-year-old young man, says that he is afraid of his dad is terrifying. And so I'm doing everything I can to align with the professionals and use the framework of the mask falls off, the face reveals itself of the abusive party in my case. And it is for my child that I face this, and I appreciate the call to action, but I also feel that the silence that I will keep until my child is safe is something that I will preserve.
I'd like to speak to that really quick too. So and this is personal because I think a lot of survivors, a lot of people in family court feel that way. If I go and I'm the trained monkey and I do what they're telling me to do, they're going to give me what I'm looking for. They're going to dangle this carrot and they're going to give you your child back. 2 years ago, I was told, oh my gosh, you're a professional. I've reached out on social media. We can't believe that you did that. We think of you so highly. You're so educated. Social media is for the riffraff. You just shut up and take your place. You'll get your kids back. So for 11 months, I shut down all my efforts. I didn't email any of my legislators. By the way, if you don't know who your legislators are, you should know them. You should be emailing them daily until one of them contacts you back. Second, I shut off my social media completely, just turned it off entirely. And I will tell you, again, I'm not abusive. I don't have any findings, and there's as a Hispanic woman, there's always a need to give your credentials first, right? Because you don't know whether you're being believed or not. Women of color go through that quite often. And so, for that entire time, guess what? Nothing different happened. There was still no findings of fact. I'm not a drug addict. I don't have any of those things. Everywhere else in the world, I'm a normal functioning human in society. What happened was I suffered in silence. My children suffered in silence. There was no recourse, and my children did not come back.
So something I did not speak to in my remarks because I ran out of time. It happens. What you've just described is litigation malpractice. And I'm going to describe something to you that the legal community would call guerrilla warfare. It's really 5th generation warfare, okay? You might want to contact the America First Legal Foundation and tell them that you would like to sue an attorney for litigation malpractice. Okay? And that would go to all of you, all right? I'm sorry? It's the America, you're gonna hate me. Okay, hold on a second. Don't call it until like next Thursday, because I have to call them about being listed on a FISA warrant for Operation Arctic Frost. Okay, so I gotta get that going first. It's the America First Legal Foundation. Their website is aflegal.org. It's been my experience that this organization, they're kind of like Judicial Watch, only Judicial Watch is more focused on crime and government. I know they're like hand in hand these days, but what you're describing is actually the behavior and the lack of integrity of an attorney in front of the bar. In fact, if one really wanted to make an argument, that attorney committed a fraud upon the court. That is perhaps the most serious violation of the canon of ethics that there is in the legal profession. Enough to be disbarred. The next thing, and I would, again, this goes to every one of you, when you have an encounter like this, you file a bar complaint. Oh yes, I know, the American Bar and each state bar is probably the most corrupt organization in your state. Yes, it's an ongoing criminal enterprise, but that aside, creating a record, and when it comes time to do a racketeering case, not in state court, but in federal court, all of those records become evidentiary for the U.S. attorney. You want to go to war? Fine, let's go to war. But you're going to have to lay the battlefield first.
Hi, my name is Robin Abraham. I'm an attorney, MBA, investigative journalist. I was awarded a Harvard Wood Hero Award, affiliated with Harvard University for translating law, business, and finance to national media. I've been a veteran member of an excellent association which I recommend that you all contact called the Investigative Reporters and Editors.org, IRE.org, or come to me and I can tell you how to reach these folks. I wanted to thank Dr. Bandy and this distinguished panel for your excellent comments. I also want to thank a colleague of mine here in the audience named Eileen King, who has been working tirelessly for more than 30 years helping protected parents, domestic violence victims. And with that, I'm here to offer suggestions as a media lawyer to help you get to the points that this distinguished panel has provided. In my experience as a finance attorney, I formerly worked for SEC Enforcement, which is about criminal RICO. There is no question, based on my extensive experience as an attorney, MBA, who can run numbers in my sleep, that these are criminal racketeering cases, in many more cases that are not. Very often, the way we have presided, and I have taken 2 judges off the bench, for which there's been nonstop retaliation, has been following the money. While there are many experts in objective and subjective, the third rail of law, and I'm speaking as a former federal judicial law clerk, is judges cannot take or steal money to effect cases. That is what is happening in many of these cases. These are format cases. I'm a recovering Disney lawyer, which basically means I worked for them for close to 20 years. And in television, we work in formats. For example, the wonderful story Romeo and Juliet became West Side Story. West Side Story became High School Musical. Just like television works in formats, so do many of these cases. There is a dance that the judges do, that the lawyers do, and the guardians do, and if you want to be able to fight it, you must know what it is. I was taught this by an organized crime prosecutor in New York named Jeremiah McKenna, who fought for many years fighting the system and occasionally winning. It is called the Brooklyn Playbook. You can look it up online, the National Brooklyn Playbook, and it is the how-to guide of the weaponization of the courts. So the recommendation that reporters have given me to all of you is to work within each of your communities and find the same judges, the same lawyers, the same guardians that are doing this in case after case after case. People don't wake up one day and say, gee, I'm going to be a criminal. No. What they do is they find what they call multidisciplinary teams. They all scratch each other's backs, do pay for play, power, money, and it is criminal RICO. Now, having literally stalked U.S. attorneys while I was at Georgetown, and I have no idea how I graduated with an MBA, because I spent most of my time walking up and down Capitol Hill with documents, is media will force their hand. So the best way to do that is to find people in each state and to find the same judges, the same lawyers, the same guardians, the same expert in case after case. And usually the magic number, I've been told by assistants, are 10. So work with yourselves and please contact local reporters before you go to them and say, hi, my name is Jane Smith. I'm a mother, I'm a father, this lawyer's in my case, this is what happened. Because whenever you see a judge request assignment of a case, it is a red flag in 9 times out of 10. Judges do not get paid on commission. I haven't clerked for judges, good judges, and I clerk for excellent judges want to get rid of cases. They want them off their docket. As soon as you see judges taking cases, watch out. So look at the National Brooklyn Playbook. It is right now. You can look it up online.
Do you have a question?
Yes, the question is, how do you follow the money?
And can you repeat your name, please?
My name is Robin Abraham.
Robin, I have my last card is reserved for you. You just signed up to be on my team.
Okay. And the question is, how in each state are you holding these people accountable and following the money to be able to take it to the U.S. Attorney's Office and demand justice?
Yeah, that's a great question. I guess since Arizona has kind of taken the lead on this, I'll tell you what we've done. God, I wish Elena was here. My policy gal is an all-star. She has cataloged every single word of testimony over 40 hours. we have a stack of documentation that's 1.5 feet thick. In that, she has identified every single player. And yes, to your point, madam, there is a matrix, and I believe this is going to go back to my treatise on the pressure cooker strategy. There is a group that we are pretty close to identifying. So I just happened to catch a random thing. Sorry, this is very much Arizona, but it's going to make the point. ACCH report, which is Medicaid. How is it that there's 574 psychologists, but there's only 5 that work in that domain? And none of them have domestic assault training, PTSD training, sexual assault training. None of them have one moment of that, but they hide behind this word, and you're going to love this one, doctor. They're forensically informed. Can you define that for me? Because I was a cop on the street for 18 and a half years, 21 years DPS officer. Does that make me forensically informed too? Because I know how to do a forensic investigation? That's never a term that I've heard officially used yet. They throw that around in the context of quasi-judicial immunity. So thank you, ma'am. You are onto something, and we've got to talk, all right?
That's a good response. We're looking into the Title 4D that's going on. We know there's a lot of connections as far as money goes. I mean, you're really looking, the way that I continue to perceive this is we're really looking at mafia rings that are being ran with all the different ties. But the Title 4D is a big one, and that is on the federal level. But we need to look into that. I wanted Veronica, though, to talk about how we've been gathering information and what we're talking about and asking.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Senator Nichols. So I think that everybody here in this room has the capacity to do this. One thing you will find, and I'll tell you just a brief blurb of the rabbit hole that I went down was, as a Hispanic woman, and my Master's of Science, it deals with data, and I couldn't find any data as to what I was encountering. That's where my mind went, you know, when you're crying yourself to sleep on the floor because you miss your kids. What do you do? Well, I started researching. That was where my nature led me. And I couldn't find any data. What I was looking for was race data, because someone made some offhand comment, well, maybe the judge doesn't like you because you're Mexican, right? And I thought, that can't be it. Like, I mean, 21st century, like, that's not it. So I started looking at race. Like, how does this judge in particular decide cases based on race? We did that for a while in the civil rights movement, right, where you could look at race and see how some states have that. What I realized in the family courts, there's no data. So race is not captured. I will say, just from the data that we are gathering, that Black men, Hispanic men are not the men that are taking children from mothers on a national scale. It is because they're more afraid of the system, so abusers will weaponize it in a demographic that they're comfortable with. So the way that we began to capture data was by putting out a Survey Monkey. What are the questions that needed answered? Because we couldn't find those. What questions did people have? Just everyday victims that we're talking to. You go and join parent groups, because again, it is not female against male. And I hope that if I do anything through this movement, aside from helping our children, is that we create a bond there, that it is not the divide. It is the egregious party gets the child. It is not man, it is not woman. It just happens to be that it's lopsided because domestic violence is still perpetuated by the bigger person, which is normally men. That doesn't mean that all men are abusive. And so I hope that gap closes. That is how we are gathering data, is just a Survey Monkey. Where does that data lead? If you follow the numbers, just like anything, any finance person can tell you, if you follow the numbers, you'll find your answers. When there are no numbers, that's an issue. Start a Survey Monkey in your state. It can be run by anyone. And then you take that data and you compile it. And that's really how I think that I was able to connect with some of my legislators, was, hey, I have 65 people. Again, my observations were with one judge, because that was my personal story. I said I have 65 people, I had 120 that had egregious stories, but I had 65 where I could say there was a violation of the law as it is written. Not that we need new law, not that we need change, that someone is violating a law as it is written right now. And I took that data and I emailed it to every single legislator almost weekly to see who would listen. It's something very easy you can capture, it doesn't cost money to do, and you just have to ask the right questions. You can use Google, you can use SurveyMonkey, whatever you.
And we're taking that information as our task force because we are writing a white paper of our findings, of the summary. We've been looking for patterns in the surveys, like the amount of money that's being spent, because we don't even have that information. That's one that our task force wants to know, is how much is this costing people? We don't even know if it's out there. So we're utilizing the survey to find out that information that's missing, that's lacking in our state, so that we can put together the package deal, so that when we come and talk to our legislators this next session about the bills that we want to pass, or how we want to clarify law, or what needs to be changed, that we have concrete evidence to be able to utilize from them.
And actually, just a second, you guys have just given us a great idea. Cause the court to make a minute entry at the opening of every session of court. How much has this cost in court time, lawyer time, billable hours, every single penny? What has this cost? If you put that into statute, you're going to have a running total of what the court is causing in the way of financial damage. So hats off to you guys. That idea came from me.
Maybe on this familycourtviolence.com, we maybe have like a survey for us to maybe come.
I was just about to mention Project Justice USA, partnering with One Mom's Battle. They have done a phenomenal nationwide survey of over 2,000 responses, answering just these questions, and the answers that they're getting, the patterns that they're discovering are just phenomenal. And so when I discovered that they were doing this, I offered and gathered a formative team at this moment to do a scientific analysis of this, because this is what is lacking. I would say there are three things, from my perspective, that could potentially make a change. That's stories, which the legislatures have started. Next is science, to state that this is not just subjective opinion, not disgruntled litigants unhappy with their rulings. I've never heard this expression so commonly as in family court. So showing the numbers, science. And third is establishing standards. Whatever means by which it is done, the people need to demand standards.
In New Hampshire, one of the things that we're looking at is compare the reports that the government, that the state has to prepare, and the audits that are done by the feds on a periodic basis of Title IV deed monies, and you can ask for that under your Freedom of Information Act. Interestingly, New Hampshire has failed virtually every single federal audit. And compare that to, we have a Bureau of Child Support Services, and so whatever the agency is in your state, and just start comparing the numbers and the fields of data and see how they align. I think you're going to find a big mismatch.
We have time for one last question, and I'm afraid the lady in the back.
Hey, my name is Dr. Kreslin Baron Odom, and I am here from Georgia. And I keep hearing over and over again, what can we do? What can we do? We gotta do something. What can we do? I'm from a very small town in Georgia, and I wanted to share what we've done. Across my town, and now across my state, we have these pink signs up everywhere. And so you may think, well, it's a small thing, right? No, hot pink signs count. Just like you're not to the pressure cooker, the judges don't like these because everybody's asking, what do the hot pink signs mean? And then they go to this QR code and they find out what they mean. And we've got them now throughout Georgia. You come in.
Can you use the mic, please?
Give me the site, go to
We can't hear
Barron
you.
Foundation. Oh, I'm sorry. We have the signs on the Barron Foundation because so many of you have contacted me and asked, could you follow suit? And when we make them, we'll make you an individualized QR code. If you want one in Spanish, you can do that. If you want one with your child's photo or without, depending on the way your case is rolling, we have a version for that as well. But I will tell you, resoundingly, people will take notice of the hot pink. It's bright, it's vibrant, they can't not see it. It's cheap, anybody can put it in their yard, and it takes note, people give it notice. And it's working in Georgia. Georgia's a hard state.
Two comments on this. Number one, that's guerrilla warfare. Okay? See what she's doing. This is also an example of fifth generation warfare. It's the battle for the mind, all right? General Flynn and Boone Cutler, rest his soul, have a book called Fifth Generation Warfare. Actually, it's a series of fifth generation warfare books. This is, you're talking about getting into the gray space
3D chess.
of not just the judges, but the lawyers, and because they're like roaches, I'm sorry. They always scatter for the corner when the lights come on.
Yes, yes. It also builds a community of support behind you because people become very aware of what's happening, which seems to be what our entire goal is, right? Let everybody know what's happening so they'll care. So we have to get people talking, and Hot Pink Signs are doing that in Georgia. And if you're interested, contact me. I'll be glad to help you out. Thank you. Thank you all for being
Sometimes you just have to think outside of the box, and Veronica's done a great job in our state with doing that. She can attest to some of the things that she's done, but think outside of the box. Don't let them box you into having to do things a certain way, or that you can't talk about whatever. I mean, we have people in our state that have had their cases sealed, and they are talking. They are telling their story. We're reaching out to the not traditional media sources in our state. Outside of those, there's a lot of grassroots media that's out there that you can contact, because a lot of the mainstream media does not want to report this sort of stuff. They're comfortable where they're at. They don't want to tell stories like this. So reach out to the other ones that are out there, the ones that have started because of these issues or other issues. You can find them. They're all over the place now. Citizen medias type groups, they're out there everywhere. Use social media, utilize social media. I love and hate social media. I would probably not do it if I didn't have to, but I do, because it's a way to communicate, it's a way to get effective, it's a way to share your story, to interview other people. Just keep finding ways. When you find a wall, find a way to get around that wall, because there is a way to do it.
But what do you do if you have a gag order?
We have people that are speaking out that have gag orders too.
I don't want to go to jail.
I think you have to just find different ways to do it, right? So not always do you have to be the spokesperson, right? Like there's, for example, I could never do what Jessica does, and she's doing it very well. That doesn't mean we're not doing anything. When you have to have, it really is a team collaborative, right? You have to have the people who are good with whatever skill they have. I think it's about building that community with the signs. So she has a creative way to do it. So if you have a gag order, what is your strength, right? I hear, and I want to leave this for every parent. You have to go through the fire without looking like you went through the fire. That is one of the, because you're going to go into that courtroom and they're going to call you crazy regardless. So everywhere else in your life, don't be crazy. Make sure that this time away from your children, if those are the only children you have in your home and you used to be a stay-at-home mom, you have some form of strength. Go harness that. Go take a course. Go to school. Go do something, because regardless of where you are now, unfortunately, those babies are going to get older. And that person person who is devastating you is gonna look back and say, see, I was right, look at that crazy lady. You might not have been crazy before. Or look at that guy, look how aggressive he is. Well, yeah, he might not have been an alcoholic before family court, but now he is. So you have to think of different ways to mobilize. You have to think outside of the box. And one of the greatest things to remember is that you can't do it alone. It takes, I was just talking to Tammy about some of the legislative volunteers that they have. We have people that don't even have children that are behind us. One of our great representatives in Idaho, Heather Scott, is on the co-chair on the committee. She doesn't have children, but she knows what a family means to Idaho, and she's listening to her constituents. So you will find people. My greatest strength is prayer. You will find people, he will open the doors, and he will close the doors that need to be closed. And I think that's the thing that you need to take away, is that it's not a one-day thing. You're gonna have to have some hard truths. If you sit down in a group and you're like, well, you're not giving me my kids back, so I'm walking out the door. Well, okay, oh, you didn't help anyone, you actually just triggered probably a table, and now they don't wanna help you. Because they're like, that person's just kind of a butt, right? So you have to just take whatever your strength is. Think very, very deep. If you're not a professional, what can you do in your spare time? What is your skill? Everybody has a skill that they can contribute. If you have a gag order, why not write on Reddit, right? Start getting on Reddit and talking about a story that maybe isn't your own. Start running a survey. Start emailing complete ambiguous things out. Start gathering data. There's so much that you can do with a gag order. My case is entirely sealed. Entirely against constitutional law and all of that. That's just the matter. It is. I cannot disseminate any form of document from my case. I can speak, and I'm going to do just that.
3 comments on gag orders. Number 1, the gag order cannot prevent you from talking to your own counselor and therapist. Number 2, it doesn't affect anybody but you. What I'm saying? If there's a witness in the courtroom that just happens to be a friend of yours, that gag order does not apply to them. Okay? Number 3, that gag order does not apply to you talking to your elected representation. I'd love to see a judge try and go toe-to-toe with me or Senator Nichols or Representative JD, Representative Moore. I'd love to see a judge try and go toe-to-toe with me, especially when we're going to bring up separation of powers. Y'all know what that is, right? Let me see a whole bunch of heads. The court cannot interfere with the legislative branch. Just like the legislative branch is not supposed to interfere with the court. Except,
hold on a second, hold on.
Except,
I
of course,
say, the legislative branch is the most powerful branch in government.
That's right.
They may forget that sometimes, but they are.
All the time. Except they also forget, where's the appropriation for the court come from? That would be the legislature. You want to stay in business? Perhaps you should, I don't know, sit down and shut up for a little while.
Well, on that note. Well, also, reporting crime is not covered by gag orders.
That's right.
And use your voice strategically. Add your voice to the excellent survey. It's all about awareness. That's what they're most afraid of. And awareness is one of the reasons why November has become the National Family Court Awareness Month and why we chose to hold this conference. And again, we will continue to try to develop a way that people can get together. FamilyCourtViolence.com will become a website after today's program. And I can be reached at vanhealy.com. And to continue the conversation, we will end here, but the conference continues until 5 p.m. Again, please join me in thanking our panelists and all of you. For those who are registered, will be in person the left of the entrance.
She must be if you've seen that.
Yeah, and so she just moved to.
No,